Good morning, councillors and staff. Welcome to the Community Standing Committee meeting for Wednesday the 10th of February. It's now my pleasure to declare the meeting open at 9:03 a.m. I don't believe we have any leaves of absence, and I'll now hand over to Councillor Duff as the Indigenous Affairs portfolio holder to conduct the recognition of the traditional owners. Thank you, Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to acknowledge country and the land where we meet this morning, the Waka Waka land, and acknowledge the elders both past, present and emerging. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. We'll move on. 5.1, minutes of the Community Standing Committee meeting. Oh, sorry, declarations of interest. Very important we deal with that these days. Okay, does anyone have a matter to declare, an interest to declare in relation to any of the matters shown in the agenda today? Councillors? No? If you do come across something as we move through, please feel free to put your hand up and we can deal with it as we go. Okay, moving on to 5.1, minutes of the previous meeting.
Sorry, Mr Mayor.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Shoemaker. Please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just in relation to item 9.6, just want to make the council aware I own a property and a holiday property on the Bunya Mountains, and just not sure if that conflict is relevant. I'm happy to leave the room for the discussion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Shoemaker. So you're just disclosing that you own land, property at the Bunya Mountains, and item 9.6 relates to use of a reserve land area at the Bunyas. We might deal with that now, Mr CEO. I think so. Okay, Councillor Shoemaker. What we might do is ask the General Manager to, first of all, Councillor Shoemaker, to give us just a brief, a very brief introduction as to the content of item 9.6. We'll then perhaps ask you to leave the room while we deal with that matter. Thank you. So just before you do, Councillor Shoemaker, General Manager O'May, could we just have a brief overview of 9.6, the content of that, for the benefit of the chamber?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. So this item deals with the investigation of establishment of a interpretive centre or meeting place at the Bunya Mountains, development of a reserve or park up there. So it's basically suggesting that we investigate the options for that.
So, General Manager, the establishment of a community park on an item of reserve land, is that what we're dealing with here?
It's establishment of a meeting place, interpretive centre on the park. There is a reserve for park up there existing, so it's just development of that area of land.
Thanks, General Manager. Councillor Shoemaker, could you give us a bit more detail in terms of your property? You have a freehold interest to the property and its proximity to the reserve land in question? Thank you.
Yes, Mr Mayor. I'd also like to note I'm a member of the Bunya Mountains Community Association. I've just recently joined, so for those reasons I'd probably prefer to leave the meeting. My property at the Bunya Mountains is an investment property. It's freehold land in the gated community. We stay in it on weekends and use it for our own family, but we do rent it from time to time. So I think for those reasons, I'd be more comfortable in leaving the room for that discussion. Please, Mr Mayor. Thanks,
Councillor Shoemaker. So Councillor Shoemaker has declared a conflict of interest, declarable conflict of interest in relation to item 9.6, pursuant to her that she has an interest in freehold property there and is also a member of the Bunya Mountains Community Organisation. As such, has voluntarily decided to leave the room and leave the meeting and stay away until such time as 9.6 is dealt with. Thank you, Councillor Shoemaker. Councillors, no other items of conflict of interest that you'd like to put forward? Okay, let's move on to 5.1. Minutes of the previous meeting of this committee held on the 2nd of December 2020 can be found at 6. Councillors, I'd now move that those minutes be accepted as a true and correct record of the meeting. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Potter. Councillors, do you have any questions or commentary in relation to those minutes? Those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you all. Item 6.1 is the Community Arts, Heritage, Sport and Recreation Portfolio Report, and it's my pleasure to hand over to Councillor Potter to present such. Thank you, Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll start with the libraries. So, having sustained water damage in December 2020, staff from the Kingaroy Library have since been working to create a bright and inviting space to accommodate a freshly curated adult non-fiction collection and study area. Following the Queensland Public Library Standards and Guidelines, this collection contains items that meet the information, education, recreation and cultural needs of the local community. Using funds from the State Library of Queensland Public Library grant, staff will continue to purchase contemporary, high-quality items for the non-fiction collection that cover a range of popular topics and interests. Members of the community are invited to suggest items for purchase to continue building a collection that meets the needs of the South Burnett residents. Library Lovers Day. Move over Valentine's Day because the 14th of February is also Library Lovers Day. Library Lovers Day provides the chance for community members to reconnect with their local library and share the library love. The initiative, coordinated by the Australian Library and Information Association, ALIA, aims to raise the profile of the services which libraries offer. South Burnett Library's Library Lover Day celebrates from the 8th to the 14th of February 2021, provide the perfect opportunity to explore the collections and services available at our local libraries. Each person to visit during this time will go into the draw to win a book and chocolate bundle, so why not pop in and say hello? With plenty of comfy armchairs to sit in and read a good book, the latest issue of the favourite magazines or even local newspaper, each library in the South Burnett has plenty of reading material to choose from. If an item isn't on the shelves at your local library, staff can reserve it from another South Burnett Libraries branch or place an order on the interlibrary loan request, and this is all for free. The library also provides free access to a variety of digital resources, including ebooks with e-audio books via BorrowBox, free movie streaming with Beamer Film, and free online tech tutorials with lynda.com. All of the friendly staff can help community members navigate. The free internet access is available on the library's public access computers or connect to Wi-Fi on a personal device. The library also offers printing, scanning and email facilities. There really is something there for everyone. The Community Grant Program. Round 2 of the 2021 Community Grant Program is currently open and closes on February 28. If you are a not-for-profit community organisations delivering programs, activities and events within the South Burnett, you could be eligible. Applications will be open in the following categories: community event sponsorship, school student awards, community hall insurance grant, regional arts development fund, healthy communities sponsorship, project program one-off sponsorship and Australia Day event sponsorship. Don't forget in-kind sponsorship, elite performance, youth grant and councillor discretionary funds and Indigenous Affairs Fund applications can be submitted year-round. Arts. Fundamental of Arts fundraising workshop. As part of our involvement with collaborative regions, extending arts and culture outcomes beyond local government association boundaries, a one-day workshop has been flagged for April for the South Burnett Fundamentals of Art fundraising. Workshop is very helpful for the recovery of artists and art organisations within our regions. This workshop will increase their skills in fundraising, which is a skill that in current times is particularly needed. Applications to the Queensland Bushfire Category C grant. Council has provided a letter of support for Central Queensland University application for the Queensland Bushfire Category C grant and to confirm our partnership with this creative recovery project. We believe that the Creative Recovery Training is an ideal program for our council to support, as we are confident it can help our communities better prepare for the next disaster. A lot of this information is actually available on the council website, but also the CQ Rasen Facebook page, if people want to go to that Facebook page. Sport and recreation. Fair play vouchers, previously known as Get Started vouchers, are available to eligible children and young people aged 5 to 17 inclusive from Queensland can apply online to fair play vouchers valued up to $150 to help pay for the cost of membership and registration fees. There is a limit of one voucher per child/young person per calendar year, and there are only a limited number of vouchers available from the Queensland Government. So the key dates you need to remember are the 20th of January 2021, round 4 applications open. The 17th of March 2021, round 4 applications close. The 12th of May 2021, round 4 vouchers expire and must have been presented to the clubs. Clubs have until the 26th of May to redeem funds from the Queensland Government. To find out if you're eligible and how to apply for a voucher, visit Queensland Government website www.qld.gov.au. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move that my portfolio report be accepted.
Thank you very much, Councillor Potter. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillors, questions, comments in relation to the report? Okay. Right, councillors, those in favour that the report be received for information of the committee? Passed unanimously, thank you all. Item 6.2 is at 22, invitation to join the Queensland Climate Resilient Council's QCRC program. Mr CEO, would you mind just providing an introduction to that matter? Thank you.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just bringing up on my screen. We had a letter of invitation to join this program. It's been a couple of times. It's come up on our radar. Direction is just saw today if council wants or would like to participate in the program. LJQ and other agencies support it. Resource-wise, it doesn't seem to be a terribly heavy commitment to resources, so we could give it a roll for 12 months and see where it goes. The other aspect of it, which is quite appealing given the draft corporate plan, if council maintains Environmental 1, which is in environmental sustainability policy, it probably fits neatly in under that. So for use the term an easy win for something that's not resource very heavy, our participation in it may be, and so my preference would probably be to give it 12 months and see what it does. If it doesn't do anything, well, we've not lost anything. If it becomes too resource heavy, well, then that's a different discussion. If it adds benefits, well, that's a really good thing.
Thank you, Mr CEO. Okay, well, look, I'll move that that the committee recommends to council that South Bennett Regional Council agrees to participate in the Queensland Climate Resilient Council's program. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Potter. Okay, councillors wishing to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Henson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Yeah, look, I'd speak in favour of this simply because in communication within the rural sector, climate is on the tip of everybody's tongue, and last night was one thing with the meeting in the town hall, so I think, as our CEO's alluded to, I think a 12-month run and see where it goes could be interesting. So yeah, I'd be supportive of this.
Thank you, Councillor Henson. Those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you all. Item 7.1 can be found at 30. And it's now my pleasure to hand over to Councillor Henson to present the Rural Services, Natural Resource Management, Planning and Compliance Services Portfolio Report. Thank you, Councillor Henson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thank you, councillors, to be able to table their Rural Services, Natural Resource Management, Planning and Compliance Services Report. I'd like to start with weed control under Rural Services, Natural Resource Management. A total of 54.6 hectares of weed control was completed in December and January. An outbreak of Hudson pear was surveyed and treated at Wilkesdale. and treatment of lantana was undertaken in the Gudja, Brooklands, Glencliff, Benarkin, Runnymede and South Nanango areas. Treatment of groundsel and joint rat's tail grass on main roads throughout the region. An annual ragweed treatment completed at Wengenville and Blackbutt. Inspections and treatment of Parthenium in the Mergen and Madeira vine at the Warrulan wetlands, and splatter guns were loaned by landowners at Dangor, Bowie, Wengenville, Warrulan, Burrendown, Blackbutt, Brooklands, Glenrock and Chelmsford to assist with groundsel and lantana control. Spray trailers were borrowed by landowners at Bowie, Dangor, Maidenville, Ellesmere and Memorandie area for the treatment of restricted weeds, and in fire management, all priority burns for the 2021 SBRC Operation Cool Burn program have been completed. In environmental assessments, 4 roadside burning and fence line clearing applications were assessed, and stock route grazing permits, 2 route adjustment applications, adjustment applications were received and processed in December and January. And I think I made mention previously that we might see an increase in grazing permits with the ongoing dry weather. Sale yard staff conducted 1,828 cattle tick inspections. They dipped 2,110 head. A total of 1,036 head were sold through the Coolangatta sale yards in December and January. In the wild dog and feral pig control, 3 landowners were supplied with baits for wild dog and feral pig control in December and January, and a total of 640 baits were distributed across 902 hectares. 6 cat traps were hired out to landowners in the Bowie, Nanango, Blackbutt and Wandai areas. 4 wild dog traps were used in the Bunya Mountains, Nanango, Wandai and Clorna areas, and 2 pig traps were used in Nanango. With rabbit control, biological control was distributed on 5 properties in the Crawford and Nanango areas. With wandering livestock, Council received 18 requests to attend wandering livestock across the region, and 5 goats were impounded. In planning, the declarations of applicable event. On the 15th of December 2020, the Minister for Planning further extended the COVID-19 application event until the 30th of April 2021. The Minister for Planning can make a blanket declaration for certain uses or essential businesses to operate 24-hour operations, 7 days a week, to ensure that they can work around the clock in emergency situations to deliver vital goods and services to Queenslanders. These provisions can only occur during an applicable event, such as the COVID-19 public health emergency, or where an applicable event is declared for other future disasters through a notice. The Wide Bay Burnett Regional Plan, the Department of State Development Infrastructure, Local Government and Planning released a draft WBB Regional Plan Issues and Opportunities discussion paper and summary for review and feedback in late December 2020. The draft discussion paper provides a range of policy options and responses to further explore through the WBB report plan review. The paper has been developed through the consultation and feedback received from key stakeholders and working groups to date, and through ongoing research on the WBB region. This discussion paper will now be presented to the various stakeholder working groups and inform the draft Wide Bay Burnett Regional Plan that is anticipated to be released for public consultation by mid-2021. An amendment to the South Burnett Regional Council Planning Scheme 2017, following on from administrative amendment to the planning scheme adopted by Council on the 16th of December 2020, and that commenced on the 4th of January 2021. Council's planning staff prepared a timeframe and budget estimate that is submitted today as a separate report. The timeline reflects the process mandated by the Minister in the ministerial guidelines and rules for amending a planning scheme. Economic support instrument provision in the Planning Regulation 2017. Amendments to the Planning Regulation 2017 were made on the 11th of September 2020 that seek to support the statewide economic recovery initiative by streamlining some statutory planning processes. The amendments prescribe a process to enable Council to make an economic support instrument for its local government area and determine the time frame for which that instrument will apply. An economic support instrument adopted by Council applies on a temporary basis to the provisions on the regulation that, point 1, reduces the level of assessment for certain uses to code assessment, Part 8B, Division 3. Point 2, makes certain building work accepted development, Schedule 6, Part 1, Section 1A. And point 3, makes certain material changes of use involving existing buildings as well as home-based businesses accepted development, Schedule 6, Part 2, Section 7A and 7B. Once adopted, the provisions in the economic support instrument would apply in place of the provisions in Council's planning scheme for the zones and uses listed in the regulation. Council may only make an instrument between 11th of September 2020 and the 17th of September 2021. The regulation provides for a local government to revoke an instrument in effect by resolution. The economic support measures can be incorporated into the proposed amendment of Council's planning scheme to be in effect on a permanent basis. A separate report is included on the agenda today that provides a more detailed explanation of the support instrument that Council may adopt. The Development Initiative Scheme, the incentive scheme adopted by Council, resulted in an increase in inquiries from developers that hold existing approvals to commence developments and take advantage of the scheme. Council's planning staff are working closely with customers to overcome barriers to deliver the developments. And in compliance, dog registration renewals. A reminder to all dog owners, dog registration renewals were sent out late last year. Payment of registration is now overdue. Council will be conducting house-to-house dog registration checks shortly, and Council therefore encourages dog owners with outstanding registration or a dog over the age of 3 months of age and as yet not registered to come in and pay and finalise registration immediately. COVID-19 workload for the environmental health staff has spiked again with the recent restrictions implemented in the Greater Brisbane area. This, plus continuing to field questions and be involved in informing and liaisoning with the community and providing advice, is draining substantial resources for our small environmental health officer, our EHO team. Our EHO staff also involved in assisting event coordinators to address their COVID-19 obligations and interact with Queensland Health. This unforeseen situation and the associated workload is having a significant impact upon the other EHO functions performed by Council. Compliance officer position. One of Council's compliance officers has recently resigned, effective on the 9th of April 2021, moving on to retirement. The compliance team is appreciative of the long notice provided, and it is hoped that a suitable replacement can be found before this valuable team member leaves. The full-time vacancy has been advertised and closes on the 12th of February 2021. Compliance officer is a special project position. Compliance are also presently advertising for a fixed term appointment for up to a maximum of 3 months to conduct the house-to-house dog registration check, follow-up on outstanding registrations and dogs that are not registered at all. Compliance inspections will be starting shortly. And with that, Mr Mayor, I'd like to table that my portfolio report be accepted and received. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Henson. A very comprehensive report. Do we have a seconder for such? Thank you, Councillor Duff. Okay, councillors wishing to put questions forward or comments. Thank you, Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Maybe a question through you for General Manager O'May, just in relation to the Wide Bay Burnout Regional Planning process, just chasing a little bit more information. It did come up in a meeting I was in with State Development the other day, and just hoping you might be able to provide a summary as to Council's involvement in that process to date, and how the consultation and feedback is being progressed from South Burnett's point of view, please.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Shoemaker, yeah, we were involved initially with discussions with the department late last year. I know the regional plan process got put on hold for a while there, but we're involved in initially, and they've come back with the options paper, which will outline, which will go out for consultation. We've actually got a meeting this Friday, so we actually haven't caught up with the department yet. So we'll be meeting with them on Friday and just they'll be going over the options paper, which will go out. That will go out later with the community, and that's what we'll be seeking feedback into the regional plan. So the manager of planning is been involved with that process. I think the mayors will have a separate committee where the mayors of the Wide Bay region are involved in that level, looking at the regional plan. So they're really in the process of putting the issues papers together that can go out into the community.
Thanks, General Manager. Just wanted to also make Council aware that amendment to the South Burnett Regional Council's Planning Scheme 2017, that is item 7.4 on the agenda, which we'll get to shortly. Furthermore, the Development Incentive Scheme, I believe where there's a body of work happening behind the scenes to bring to Council, bring to future standing committees updated reports on the number of development applications that have been going through. So we'll get some data, some statistical information around being able to gauge the extent to which the Development Incentive Scheme has resulted in an increase in applications and through our planning system. So just to bring that to your attention, you can look forward to that coming through once we got that reporting regime in place. And I just had an inquiry in relation to dog registration renewals, General Manager, through the week. Where we have a single lot that contains a number of residences, perhaps we would have a number of units on one block of land. I just want to get some information as to the limitation on dog registrations. So say, for example, we have a block of land that contains 4 units. Are the residents able to have 1 or 2 dogs in each unit, or are we limited to, say, for example, 2 dogs to the whole allotment, particularly in cases where we have retirees on those units? Are you able to provide some more information on that or take that on notice? Thank you.
Yeah, I can confirm. My understanding it would be parcel size. So if you've got a complex with 4 units, then it wouldn't be 8 dogs per normal quarter-acre allotment sort of thing. So it is usually just a parcel size. But I can confirm that, but that's my understanding. As far as registration, it's more the numbers, so that would be in our planning scheme and that. So registration is a separate, so all dogs are required to register, but it would be the limitations through the planning scheme and local laws that would limit the numbers.
Yes, thank you, General Manager. Perhaps if we could wondering whether we could have a report brought back to a future standing committee on the provisions within the planning scheme that relate to dog registrations, just to brief Council on what those limitations are. But so that Council can at least be informed, if not give some consideration to that. We're getting people coming forward in the community where we might have 4, half a dozen units on one block, and we've got perhaps a retiree in each unit, and they'd each like to have their own dog, but I'm being told that perhaps some of them can't have a dog because someone else on that block of land in a separate unit already has, or we've already reached the maximum numbers. So that's what's behind the request. If we could perhaps put that on the agenda for a future standing committee meeting at some stage in the future, that'd be appreciated.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we can bring back, and probably if we look at a couple of examples, we can come if you've got some of those, we can work through and say what the situation would be. But if the units are strata titled, certainly would be a different situation to one lot. So yeah, we can work through a couple of those.
Yeah, that'd be much appreciated. Thanks very much, General Manager O'May. Okay, councillors, so we have Councillor Henson's report received for information. Those in favour? Oh, sorry, Councillor Potter. I often miss a light. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question is a double-barrel question, but it may be on the nose a little bit. It's actually to do with, is there a fine that we can fine residents if they do not pick up their dog faeces? And also, is there a fine, or I know residents are meant to have their, when they do walk their animals, they're meant to have their dogs on a lead. Is there a fine to that as well? Because I've been approached by a member of the public who seems to be cleaning up dog faeces from her front footpath every single day nearly, and she's just getting a little bit sick and tired of it. And it doesn't take long for you to go for a walk to actually find it around the neighbourhood yourself. And is there something we can do? Can we put something out to the public to make sure that they... Sorry about the question, Mr Mayor, but I'm just wondering if there is something we can do, messages we can put out there to make people pick up their dog faeces.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor. The short answer is yes, there is a fine, a breach of the local laws, whether it be not on lead or not cleaning up after the animal. The issue generally comes down to enforcement, or if, trying to capture someone in the act. But we can certainly do, we can certainly do an advertising, put some messaging out. Certainly with our house-to-house compliance inspections, that can be sort of utilised as a reminder to people. The short answer is there is. If we could, and particularly if we would have a repeat offenders that we're aware of, it certainly that's the sort of situation we'd be chasing.
Thanks, Councillor Potter, for the question. It is important to people. And General Manager O'May, if I could just refer the matter to you, Mr CEO, to perhaps organise a community education program through our media in relation to dog litter and also in relation to dogs off leashes. To inform the community of the local law requirements on such, and further to that, perhaps let people know that if they do find someone that's got a dog wandering without a leash or doing the wrong thing on their footpath, to feel free to ring up and report such to council, so that we can just help work with the community to try and monitor and enforce the local laws. Okay, so Mr CEO's got that. Thank you, Councillor Potter. Thank you, General Manager O'May. Okay, if there's no one else, those in favour that the report be received? Thank you all. Passed unanimously. Item 7.2 at 33 is the Natural Resource Management Operational Update. And I might just introduce that with a briefing.
Mr Mayor, my apologies for interrupting you. I'd just like to move a motion off the floor if I can, further to Councillor Henshin's report.
Yes, please proceed, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I can see clear synergy between the work that's happening with the Wide Bay Regional Plan and the Economic Development Portfolio. So I was hoping to move a motion that as the portfolio holder for economic development, I could work with Councillor Henshin in his role as planning portfolio holder to work with the planning staff to progress council's feedback and the Wide Bay Burnett Regional Planning process.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. So what we'll do now is if we can just perhaps get you to just present that again clearly and concisely so that we can have that put into the agenda. Thank you, Councillor Shoemaker. Mr CEO, from a procedural perspective, the wording of that motion, are we comfortable with that?
Yeah, please, not. The Mayor is the principal councillor responsible for the regional plan. So the Mayor is there's a gazettal of a committee. I'm just processing, and probably when the council speaks to it. So the meeting on Friday, for example, is specifically officer only. So it's not that we're the last of the councils across the region to have the state development. I mean, as a general statement, yes, but all councillors. So I suppose if just wondering whether it should be like the word subcommittee in there, or if that's where you're heading. But the Mayor is the principal councillor responsible, and that's been done by Government Gazette, so we cannot override that even if we wanted to. And I don't suggest that's where you're going, but yeah, So ultimate responsibility for the regional plan will rest with the mayor as the council representative. And then it's just, I suppose as opportunity presents itself as to what we can do going forward.
Thank you.
Councillor
Yes.
Shoemaker. Thank you, Mr. CEO. Yes, Councillor Shoemaker.
Certainly, I understand that, and it's not my process, my intent at all to overstep the position of the mayor. My intent is just I can see clear synergy between this work, the planning and the economic development portfolios, and would just like to partner in the process to really present South Burnett's case moving forward. So perhaps if that's a subcommittee, I'm happy to progress that, but I'm just mindful of how important the regional plan is, and really just think it's a great opportunity for this council to collaborate in the outcomes.
Councillor Shoemaker, just in light of Mr. CEO's comments there, just wanted to put this to you, that as the portfolio, that just to reword that a subcommittee be established to consider and inform the mayor in relation to council's input to the Wide Bay Burnett Regional Plan, and that the subcommittee include councillors Henshin and Shoemaker, along with council officers as determined by the Chief Executive Officer. Mr. CEO, once that's written, I might get you to again just to comment on your thoughts as to the appropriateness of that before we go back to you, Councillor Shoemaker.
And the other bit that just needs to be in the front of it is that the committee recommends to council and then we'll endorse it at the general. Yep. Yeah, no, that's, yep, absolutely. Because so we're all waiting on the officer briefing from the department and to see where this goes next. So there's going to be a mountain load of work, so there'll be plenty to share.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Councillor Shoemaker, are you happy with the reworded motion that's on the screen at this point in time?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity to discuss that. Yes, I'm very happy with that motion and would like to put it to the floor for consideration, please.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Henshin. So Councillor Henshin has moved that the committee recommends to council that a subcommittee, Councillor Shoemaker, sorry. My apologies. Sorry, Councillor Shoemaker. That the committee recommends to council that a subcommittee be established to consider and inform the mayor in relation to council's input to the Wide Bay Burnett Regional Plan, and that the subcommittee include Councillor Henshin and Councillor Shoemaker, along with council officers as determined by the Chief Executive Officer. Councillor Shoemaker, are you happy to move such?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Good, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Froloff. Councillors wishing to speak for or against? Those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. CEO. Okay, let's now move on to item 7.2, which is at 33, the Natural Resource Management Operational Update. And if I could just lead in on that, particularly for the benefit of community information. So the Natural Resource Management Update comes forward to each of these standing committees each month, and this report provides updated information as to the months of December and January, so for that 2-month period, on the basis that we didn't have a standing committee in January, a meeting in January. It also provides year-to-date cumulative information from the 1st of July 2020 up until the 31st of January, so that's a 7-month picture as to the work that's undertaken. Now, the report includes that there are 3 projects happening in relation to NRM, and they pertain to honey locusts, African boxthorn, and the establishment of a feral animal control groups. The honey locust program is expected to started in December 2020, as did the African boxthorn, and the feral animal control group started in September 2020. Some of the data, such if we look at the year-to-date data for 7 months to 31 January, cattle dipped 8,811, cattle inspected 8,560, consignment and transfers 88,534, weighed 5570, and sold 5,648. So that was from the Coolabunnya sale yards, by the way. So 8,811 cattle were dipped at the sale yards, 8,560 inspected. So that's a fairly significant number over 7 months. The Nango dip yards put through 223 head, and we had 97 wandering livestock that council attended to in that 7 month with 4 impoundments. Wild dog and feral pig program, as Councillor Henson outlined in his report, we had 45 landhold baitings and dog gone baits. 1,156 of those were issued. Rabbit control, we had 33 landholders assisted, and we had 33 kilograms of carrots injected, and with equipment loaned out, which is basically spraying equipment, cameras, GPS, dog traps, pig traps, cat traps, tree spears, etc. 92 items of equipment have been lent out by council to landholders over that 7 month period. Looking at adjustment permits, we've issued 3 of those, 3 prescribed burns, 40 environmental assessment prior to roadworks, and 10 fence line clearing and roadside burning applications. In terms of weed control, council has treated 98.6 hectares, and that cuts across a whole range of weeds from cat's claw through to GRT, Parthenium, and a range of others. And we've done 283 property inspections. And we've had customer requests on feral animals of 222, 97, as I said, for wandering livestock, 6 on stock routes, 61 on weeds, and 50 general NRM customer requests. So as you can see, councillors, community, there's a significant amount of work and resources that council commits to supporting biosecurity and natural resource management across our broader region. So I'd like to, first of all, congratulate the staff on the amount of work that they've undertaken in that 7 months. And having said that, I'd now move that the NRM operational update be received for information of the committee. Do we have a second of such? Thank you, Councillor Henson. Okay, councillors wishing to ask questions or speak to the report. Thank you, Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you, Mr Mayor, question to the General Manager. Just wondering, with the Proston and Wandai dips and also the Nanango dip, what's happening with the Proston and Wandai dips? So they're obviously not being used. And we had, I know that we had planned to put those out to tender for lease because they're not in freehold land. What's the plan going forward with those 3 dips?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. The Nananga dip, as stated in the figures there, is operational. Wandai and Proston dips aren't operational at the moment. The council's direction was that we would offer those for lease following the decision on the Coolabunnya sale yard. So that's something we could proceed with, is offering those facilities out for lease now. So that hasn't commenced yet, but that is something we can. That's what you're chasing, Councillor.
So, through Mr Mayor, am I able to move that we actually proceed with that to offer those Wandai, Proston and Nanango dip yards out to lease? Go to tender?
Just procedurally, no. Not that you've still got a live resolution. That's all.
Oh, have we?
Yeah. So you need to deal with the first one first, and then no, that's all right. So you're racing ahead of us. We deal with this one, and then we can go from there. It is already so, and if you're going to move something like that, is that council reconfirms its decision to, rather than move that, because you've already got a decision to. So the council progresses the So it's just in the verbiage.
Yep.
It would be in the vintage if it was wine, but it's in the verbiage if it's a resolution.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. It wouldn't be a council meeting without one of your nice little comments, quotes. I always enjoy them. Councillor Duff, I'll
another
come back to your
question. I've got
intended
another question.
resolution, but feel free to ask another question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanting to know, in the past, we have partnered with Sherburg with controlling the Parthenium and Baramba Creek. I'm just wondering where that's at. Are we still working with Sherburg closely to monitor that and help them with that control of Parthenium?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Yes, we are. We hadn't been treating earlier in the year. I think we presented an updated report to the December Standing Committee on this item. It was. So we are still working with them. With the drought, there was really no activity required. But yeah, we continue to monitor and spray as needed. So yeah, it is an ongoing program. And our fellas will go up into the Sherburg, into the headwaters to treat.
Just a supplementary question, because we were actually doing the program, working out the program for Sherburg, and then they were just implementing it. We actually had that arrangement with them. But I just wondering, is that still in place? That actual it was sort of like an agreement.
Yes, it is. Yeah, we are working with them closely. So it was just last year was just with the dry. It was there wasn't a lot of on ground work, but yeah, we continue to work and monitor and work with them.
You satisfied with that, Councillor Duff, or would you like a report back to a future standing committee as to the work that's been undertaken
I'd like
year to date?
a report back, if I could, to a future standing committee as to the what arrangement we have in place with Sherburg Aboriginal Council on to the with regards to Parthenium, Baramba Creek.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. General Manager, is that something we could bring to a future standing committee meeting?
Yes, we can. I will find the report that was brought to the December meeting, and I can update that, or if that's what's required.
Yeah, thanks, General Manager. If you could perhaps put that on the on your to-do list to bring a report, an updated report further to the December report. Is that something that we could perhaps do closer to the end of the financial year? Are you happy that comes through in June, Councillor Duff, or would you like that sooner?
Well, I'm concerned about it. I'm concerned about that we keep on to it. I think that it needs to be sooner rather than later.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Duff. General Manager, would the March Standing Committee be too early, or we could push it back to the April one, just in terms of the time required? Yep, March. We'll have that brought to the March Standing Committee meeting, an update on the work being undertaken with the agreement in relation to the agreement with Sherburg on the Parthenium spraying. Thanks very much, Councillor Duff. So, councillors, any other questions, comments in relation to the report? We have a motion that it be received by the committee for information. Councillor Henson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just in relation to the statistics in between the monthly from the 1st of 12 to the 31st of January 20 and 21, and the year-to-date cumulative over 5 or 6 months, I think it really needs to be noted in there that this is a classic example of seasonal conditions. When we get a flush of rain, like there was some major rain and some beneficial rain in the late October, and we virtually had nothing since, and predicted storms and influences hasn't happened. And if you look at all those figures, they're relative to just that. I mean, the cattle dip and the number of cattle there on the back of a cattle industry that's on a high that we've never seen before. We look at the wild dog and the feral program and the numbers that's there and why they're there. And then we look at the weed section and weed control and the hectares that's there, 54.6 to 98.6. It really is relative to weather conditions. It really is. And Parthenium, having had quite a deal of experience with Parthenium, waterways are certainly a concern, and the Creek and Sherburg Council, and I'm sure South Burnett Regional Council are well aware of that, but it's pretty hard to monitor when there's been no rain or no overland flow in tributaries or or water courses, but I'm certainly with councillor Duff, it's something that we need to keep a close eye on, but it's sometimes there's nothing there. When there's been no rain or no flow, there's nothing there to see or work with. So I just would like to make everyone aware that a lot of these figures are seasonal conditions.
Thanks very much, Councillor Henson, for that update. Councillors, those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you all. We'll now move on to 7.3 at 37, and I did allude in Councillor Henson's portfolio report to the fact that there would be data coming forward in relation to activities happening within the planning department of council.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, I was just going to move that other.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Duff, I forgot about you.
Yes, sorry.
How dare I do that? Councillor Henson, you've still got your light on. You just want to put that off? You.
Just wanted to move that we, that we progress the leasing, to go to tender for the leasing of Wandai, Proston and Anengo dipyards.
Mr CEO, do we need to have it as a recommendation up to the General? Mr CEO, I might just get your advice in relation to the wording of that, if you could, please. Thank you.
That's Council Progress. It is a previous resolution, so without having the resolution number with us, so we can insert the previous resolution number. Linnell, hang up to the event. Is he looking opportunistically? So that'll come back as a report, and Pete, what we'll do, or General Manager, what we'll do is we can give a bit of an update report then to the next General as to, okay, where does this go and what the process is. So yeah, no, that will certainly get the intent across. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr CEO. Councillor Duff, are you happy with the motion as it's seen there?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay, do we have a seconder for such? Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillors wishing to speak for or against? Those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you all. Thank you, Councillor Duff. My apologies for skipping past your intended motion. On to 7.3 now. As I said, pleased to be able to bring to the Standing Committee today the planning operational update, which provides to Council a report on the activity that's been going through the planning department, and I'd like to move that the planning and land management operational update be received for information. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Potter. Okay, we might now hand over to General Manager O'May and Manager to perhaps provide us a quick overview of the information contained in the report, and then councillors feel free to ask questions, make comments on that. Thank you, General Manager.
I suppose it's probably just open to questions. It does just highlight the activity in the different areas: building, plumbing, planning, and their customer requests. So just comparing the 2 years, 2019, 2020 to 2020, 21. So yeah, it's probably just open if there's any particular areas that people have questions on. Chris, I'm not sure if there's any.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councillors. I think what we need to note is particularly if you look at building certificates, pool compliance, plumbing certificates, planning customer request, we still have 4 months in the financial year to go, and we're almost at the same level we were at the end of the last financial year. And I think that's a trend or statistics that's not surprising because of the federal government's building stimulus. Anybody who's trying to appoint a builder or a draftsperson at the moment will know that most of them is they've got work up till July, and most builders can only commence work in September. So the planning, the building and plumbing staff have been flat out working, trying to keep up with the workload. And we have a consultant building certifier who unfortunately is in the same position. So his work snowballed as well, and he had to appoint another person to basically just support council work. So I guess it's good that we have the statistics, but not surprising in terms of the massive upturn in building certificates and customer request in terms of plumbing and building as well. That's really accelerated.
Yes, thank you, Manager. And just to highlight some of those numbers that Manager has referred to, and for the benefit of the public, building certificates, so in the full lights financial year, 375 were issued. This year, 7 months in, we've issued 350 already. So that's certainly tracking to go well beyond, not quite double the previous financial year. Similarly with plumbing certificates, 89 year to date after 7 months compared to 94 12 months last year. Planning customer requests, 528 in customer requests through to our planning department in 7 months compared to last year, 458 less for the whole 12 months. This year, building customer requests, 585 after 7 months compared to 771 for the whole year, again tracking to go well over. And plumbing, 103 year to date compared to 96 for the whole year last year. Planning applications, we've got 36 in so far compared to 64 overall last year. Building applications, 239 year to date compared to 364 for the whole year last year. If we just skip down there, you can see plumbing applications, 187 year to date compared to 248 for last year. So significant amount of work being undertaken there. And Mr. General Manager, I just suppose one question I had in relation, I know with building certifications, then private certifiers can do those, and you indicated that one of our private certifiers is having to put on more staff. Plumbing certifications, are they invariably, typically, for the major part, done by our council staff? My understanding, I just want to clarify, is that the case? And the second part of that question, do we have enough resources in place around plumbing certification to be able to support the level of work that's being required at the moment?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. The plumbing certification is done by council, so there is no private certification mechanism as there is in the building. So all of the plumbing approvals come through council, and the short answer is no. We will be bringing back a proposal to council and including additional resources in the plumbing. We have tendered for assistance in the short term from contract assistance. We went out prior to Christmas, and we did engage a fella through Logo to provide some short-term assistance. But yeah, we'll be bringing back to get additional resources in that area.
And in light of the fact that we've still got a lot of this work, where everyone's very busy at the moment in this building would it be possible to have that report brought to the March Standing Committee? Is that too soon, in light of the fact that things are happening fairly quickly?
Yeah, we can certainly bring something back through there. It's really through the budget process we were looking at bring it back, but
just conscious of the fact that we will have we'll have a budget review third quarter review of budget 31 March. Perhaps the March Standing Committee would have an opportunity to bring that forward such that Council could consider that, General Manager Jarvis, as part of the third quarter review if we need to allocate additional funding to support our staff in this space, because as you said, they're run off their feet, and we need to make sure that we're not slowing down the process of getting construction work completed, because we've got staff for the backlog. It's a resourcing issue for council. So thanks, General Manager. That'd be much appreciated if we could get a resourcing report on that for the March Standing Committee meeting. Councillor Shoemaker, you had questions, sorry?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My questions were very similar to yours, thank you. But and I agree, it's a great problem to have, certainly, to hear our team. Some of those statistics are really impressive, how far we've exceeded last year's numbers. I just wondered, in terms of that proposal that's coming back to council, Probably further to that, I'm just mindful of our service levels and just mindful that some of these timeframes are regulatory. So I just wanted to check in and see how things are tracking in that sense, like in terms of service level timeframes. I know we were talking about reviewing those and trying to do some work in that space. And very mindful of council's intention to have really responsive processes in that space. So just wanted a bit of an update as to how we're tracking. Is there a backlog or are there issues in that area?
Thank you, Councillor Shoemaker. General Manager, could I suggest that perhaps you could bring that forward as part of the report to the March Standing Committee, because it's a fairly big question, that one, around regulatory requirements and timeframes and how we're tracking in terms of meeting those commitments. You happy with that, Councillor Shoemaker? Yeah, thanks, General Manager. Okay, so if there's no further questions or comments in relation to the Planning and Land Management operational update, the motion is that that be received for information of committee. Those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you all. 7.4 is at 43 and is a report as to the proposed amendment to the South Burnett Regional Council Planning Scheme of 2017. And as I said, that's at 43. A little bit of background here, Council, is that under Chapter 2, Part 4 of the Minister's Guidelines and Rules, prescribes the process for making a major amendment to a planning scheme for Section 20 of the Planning Act 2016. All references in Part 4 to proposed amendment are taken to be a proposed major amendment, and Council must decide to amend the planning scheme to undertake such a major amendment. As such, the recommendation is that the committee recommend to Council that Council recommend to Council that Council resolve to make an amendment to the South Burnett Regional Council Planning Scheme 2017 under Chapter 2, Part 4 of the Minister's Guidelines and Rules. Now, Councillors, I'm going to seek a mover and a second for that, and then we can go into some discussion in relation to the background and more detail on it. But do we have a mover for such? Thank you, Councillor Shoemaker. A seconder, thank you, Councillor Potter. You happy to second that? Councillor Potter has seconded the motion. Council will now go to the floor for questions, comments in relation to such. If we don't have any, I might hand over to the General Manager and the Manager just to provide us with a bit of a summary as to the background to the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I might hand over to Chris, who's the expert in this field. The only comment in is last, I think not last meeting, the meeting in December, we had the administrative amendment went through. So that was the one fixing the typos and that sort of things. Those things will be included in the planning scheme amendment. But this is the one where there is potentially change of policy or impacts that I think Council have discussed. So I'll hand over to Chris to talk through the process.
Through Mr. Mayor, thank you, councillors. Yes, so the process let me start by saying a planning scheme is a living, or should be a living document. It's not a document that we draft and it's set in concrete and we put it on the shelf and 10 years later we try and amend it again. So we've been implementing the scheme now since 2017, and apart from the administrative amendment, we've been keeping a record of inconsistencies that we may have found or and issues that we think that could be addressed and could be done better. And that basically builds on the objective we had when we drafted this new planning scheme was to try and remove obstacles and facilitate development. So in other words, trying to make it easier for people to develop their particular properties. And throughout you'll hear the words accepted development. Now, in the old days, that used to be means development that you can just undertake without a planning approval, basically. So, and the approach is if you can't add value to the process when we stop trying to regulate people's lives, but we need to facilitate development. So the minister has, instead of having an amendment process in the regulations, when they adopted the Planning Act, adopted this document which they call Ministers' Guidelines and Rules. So, and it's administered by the responsible state government department. So any amendment to the planning scheme has to be done in accordance with the process set out in those rules. Now, our planning scheme needs to reflect, apart from council's direction and wishes, also the state planning policies. And now that we are in the process of amending the Wide Bay Burnett Regional Plan, our planning scheme also has to reflect the outcomes and the provisions in the Wide Bay Burnett Regional Plan. So what that means in effect is if we reflect those levels of, or those documents, is that when we implement development, if we implement our planning scheme, it means we've given effect to those higher order documents. So the process, I spoke to the state government and had a bit of a discussion to them. There is what they call a tailored process to shorten the time frame, but they said in their experience, you don't win, you really don't win a lot because you have to get ministers' approval to follow a shortened process. We might as well go with the full process. So it sort of starts off with council making a resolution to amend it. We then complete what is called an amendment package, which is a document indicating to the minister how we wish to amend it. So the first thing we do is we take that to the state and say, can you do a state interest check for us? In other words, will these amendments, excuse me, that we are proposing, will that actually reflect those higher order plans and the state government policy? It can take up to 60 days, my experiences, depending on the level of amendments. It could be quicker. The minister then will give us the go-ahead. It may mean that we will have to amend some of our amendments, and the minister will put conditions on it. Then we undertake public consultation. The minimum required period is 20 business days. Following the close of that consultation period, council then has to consider every properly made submission. So in other words, we prepare what's called a consultation report detailing what the submissions were, which section of the planning scheme they wish to address, and how we propose council address that submission. So that could simply be somebody saying, the zoning of my property is wrong, it shouldn't be residential, it should be business, for example. So as council, does it make sense to change that zoning, for example, or should council maintain the residential zoning, for example? If we change the amendment package significantly, we have to go, in response to all those submissions, we have to go back to the minister and ask the minister if our changes still reflect the state government's policies and procedures. If not, we may have to repeat the public consultation process. Now, I've not been involved in a situation where the minister has directed that we re-notify the planning scheme. So part of that amendment process is in the background actually consulting with the state government and say, if we do this amendment, well, you think the minister will say it's significantly different, then we'll have to go back to public consultation. So it's a bit of an iterative process. And then once the public consultation process is complete, council then seeks approval from the minister to adopt that amendment, and we can then adopt that amendment, and we'll have a new version of the planning scheme. That's the process in short. There's I included a bit of public consultation process there, which I think the state is big on, and I think it's important for us as well. And of course, that process is can be expanded, but basically what it includes is we will write to landowners where we will be changing these zonings or proposing to change these zonings. Because a lot of people say, oh, council just changed my property zoning, why wasn't I informed? So they will receive formal letter notification the council proposed to make a major change to their rights, basically. We'll have talk to planner sessions where people would actually be able to come to a council customer service centre, whether it's in Mergen or Bondi. So we will publish a list of dates and times. There'll be public notices in the South Burnett today. We'll have the planning scheme amendments displayed at the libraries. The advertisement in the notice, public notice, or the notice in the South Burnett Times will include how people can make submissions. We'll have it on council's website and your other social media platforms. And then what we did the last time is we directed emails or had particular working groups. So one would be, let's say, the local development community. Another one may be people involved in natural resource management, for example. There could be other stakeholder community groups. So we will do direct targeted email to those particular, what we call stakeholders, to inform them that we're changing the plan and inviting them for comment. In terms of the timeline, so I've just got a proposed timeline there. Obviously, this is subject to change. It's hard to really keep, for example, the state government to have their particular time frame. Public consultation looks likely in September this year. We'll hope to have the final state government review before the end of the year, and maybe adopted either end of the year or early 2022, the amendment. So it is, like I said, about a 6 to 8 month process just to go through a particular amendment. What is that? Yeah, so those are just the activities and the timing that we think and how much it will cost, the activities that will be involved. And Lynelle, if you just scroll down, I think there is, did you put the
Yeah, thanks, Manager. And the cost of that in terms of resourcing, the resourcing required to do that work. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So just to get to a point where we've done the state interest checks and prepared all the amendments, we're using a planning consultant to put our policy into planning speak so that the state government can understand it. Not that we can't do that, but they're the experts and they've got the experience in doing that. Our role as planning staff and councillors is to articulate a policy and where we want this planning scheme to take us over the next 10 years. And there is a budget item for this in the current budget to allow for the cost for undertaking these activities.
Thank you very much, Manager and General Manager. Councillors, questions in relation to the report? Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With the drafting of the amendment package, is that where we decide what we're going to do and then we put that out there as a package and then people put in submissions? Or is there an opportunity for people to actually have put their ideas forward as to where they think zonings need to change?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the drafting of the amendment package is what we would send off to the Minister initially to see what state interests, as Chris talked about, the state interest review, to see what impact it's going to have on the state interest, and then they will come back and give approval for us to take that out to the public. So the amendment package is what we go off to start with, and then the public have a look at the proposed amendments. And that was Chris was saying is if after that process we want to amend the scheme dramatically different, then it might have to essentially restart the process. So yeah, the initial stuff is to make sure that our amendments aren't in contradiction to state planning policy and that. So
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if there was something that somebody that I knew was wanting to change the zoning now, should I speak now and say that this is, or like in this process, rather than waiting till you go to the minister and then that might be in contradiction to what they're planning, and like, is there an opportunity to get that right before we go to the minister?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Yeah, certainly if you are aware of that, and we've been picking, as Chris said, we've been picking things up through the way where people have made inquiries about that sort of thing. So yeah, certainly if there is those sort of things, we can include that.
So I suppose, Councillor Duff, just in response there, that General Manager, I imagine through your office, councillors could put forward any of that information so that you can include that in that obviously detailed history you've got of community requests around this, in putting that that document forward to go to the Minister in relation to the state interest report.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, can I also just add that that initial amendment package would include all the sort of suggestions and amendments we're aware of at that point in time. There's nothing stopping a member of the community during the public consultation process to have a meeting with us or to write a letter in saying, well, look, we want the zoning to change. A classical example that I can just think of quickly would be Kingaroy North. So their land is currently zoned emerging community. Emerging community zoning is sort of a zoning, it's a bit of a holding pattern. So they may, and they did with the last planning scheme draft, come and said, no, we want a live zoning. In other words, we wanted zoned residential. The implication of changing the zoning in that case to residential means council needs to be able to deliver services there. So if we change that zoning and it means that council has to spend $8 million, for example, to provide water and sewer to that development, we perhaps need to reconsider whether it's appropriate at this point in time to change the zoning. So that's the process you go through with the community, but certainly any member of the community can, or a councillor right now, approach through General Manager's office, and we will be able to confirm whether that's actually on our list or whether we need to add that particular provision to our list of proposed amendments that we have at this point in time.
Thank you, Manager. Councillors, clear there's a process there where you can get that information through the General Manager's office. Okay, Councillor Potter.
Yeah, this is a follow-on from Councillor Duff's, actually, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Probably to Manager Chris. So what you're saying is some people have already put information forward to you, and that's the information we're going to the Minister with. But what about the people that actually haven't come forward because they're waiting for this opportunity? So they can they still put that application and chat to you about changing their zoning, whether it's from residential to rural residential or something along those lines? Because I don't know about Councillor Duff, but I've had a few people sort of mention that to me, that all of a sudden they've been changed and they didn't really know about it. So as long as we're contacting these people, if we're changing that, but also the people that have actually been changed in the past, they can come forward to you now. So are we putting out a little thing about this now and not waiting until the after as well?
Sorry, through Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it's always good to have that now. The first amendment package is, like Ms. General Manager Mayer said, the first amendment package is to actually get the state government on board to ensure that our amendments won't contradict and reflect the state government policy. So we do at this point in time have proposals that the public has given us, and there are also proposals that we as staff have picked up in the implementation of the planning scheme that we think could be better and could be improved. I don't want to charge ahead too quickly if I'm possibly phrasing that wrong. Let's have the amendment package as a start. I can't see a problem with asking the community for inputs into that. Having said that, the proviso is the amendment package can be a fairly technical document because you have to refer back to the planning scheme, and it's can be hard sometimes to read it. But we can most certainly, in terms of our process before we actually approach the state government, have a period where perhaps the public can have an input into it. But the real consultation happens once council has a firm proposal. And our proposal is not cast in stone. That's the message, really. And we will properly consider every submission that we receive down the line.
Thank you, Manager. Councillor Duff.
So I agree with what Councillor Potter is saying. If you're going to go to the minister with all these proposed changes, and then they're happy with it, and then we go out to the public, and then we get a dozen others, then they have to then go through a whole process. Whereas we could surely make it a bit easier for the public by actually getting all these their concern, like where they've got changes that they would straight away say, well, how about we do this first before we actually then go to the minister? Just to sort of shortcut the things and make it a bit easier for the public once they decide that, you're sort of like doing it twice instead of maybe just doing it once.
Yeah, I think we can certainly take that on board and maybe do something. The only concern I would have is the minister isn't going to look at whether this block changes. He's not going to assess whether this zoning changes. He's going to be looking at the impacts on state interest. So potentially, if someone came to us now and said we want to change this, and for whatever reason we don't include that, so we don't, then they would need to be making sure during the formal public consultation period that it is included in that formal process for it to be considered. So certainly take on board, and if there's and as we've picked up and where there is those things we can include now, I think it's probably not a bad idea to do something initially as an informal, but it won't be part of the formal planning process, because if we're really going to the ministers to seek approval to put the planning scheme amendment out, so we've just got to be to go through the planning scheme amendment. We don't want to look like we're doing a planning scheme amendment without ministerial approval too early, but certainly getting feedback on suggestions, we could sort of include that in as a precursor to going down the process.
General Manager, sorry, Chris, just to say, would it be problematic to perhaps say flag to the community that council will be considering a resolution in relation to seeking approval for the plan scheme amendment at its ordinary meeting in the end of February, and that should members of the community wish to come forward with submissions prior to council considering that resolution, that they could do so between now and then. That would also give councillors the opportunity to obtain that information and feed it in. We'll be very careful how we word that, because we certainly don't want to give the indication that we're embarking on a planning scheme amendment prior to ministerial approval. Would have to be very, very carefully handled.
If I may, Mr Mayor, I think we'll have a yarn to the department. There will be information go out simply from today's meeting, as well as any case, and this is a significant amendment to the scheme, and it's been it's an objective for this 12 months to get this done, dependent on state timelines, is the only proviso that's been. But we'll certainly work with the department as far as that wording and getting the information out. This one's as big as, if not the same as, the corporate plan, as far as it actually is quite often difficult in past history to get people to engage on planning schemes, because they don't, it's not that they don't understand, I'm just looking for the right word, but it really doesn't, a lot of, I won't say most, I'm generalising, but you get the impression that people don't worry about it until it directly affects them. and getting them to engage on something that doesn't directly affect them now, but in 2 years' time when they want to put the granny flat in or something, that's when you hit the engagement component with them. Certainly the council's idea, the more information and more feedback we can get in, the better. But we've just got to step through with the department the resolutions that we need to make sure that it's legal and we just don't trip over anything. So the intent is totally there. Get as much out as we can. And as councillors, if you're talking to anyone, yeah, please encourage them to send them in.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. CEO. It may be, Manager, that we simply put out some communication to the public to say that at its next ordinary meeting, council will be considering a resolution in relation to seeking ministerial approval to embark on a planning scheme amendment process, Mark, or something of that nature. So it's made clear that has to go through that process, and that as part of that, as always, council, the office is open to take submissions from anyone that has issues in relation to the current planning scheme that council could consider as part of that resolution. Perhaps if CEO Mark said, we can work with the department to make sure we get the wording around that public communication right, and we're not going to be tripping over ourselves or jumping the gun in any communication out to the community. And councillors would be encouraged, councillors, to bring that information back to General Manager O'May from anyone that may approach you or anyone you know of who has issues or desire to change the planning scheme at the moment, to bring those submissions forward. Okay, that being the case, if there's no further questions, no one else wishes to speak for or against the motion, it's on the table that the committee recommend to council. The council resolve to make an amendment to the South Burnett Regional Council Planning Scheme 2017 under Chapter 2, Part 4 of the Minister's Guidelines and Rules. Those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you all. Councillors, it's now 10:30 and I would move that we now adjourn the meeting until 10:45 for morning tea. Do we have a seconder? Thank you. All councillors in favour of such? Very good. We'll adjourn the meeting now until 10:45. Thank you all. Okay, welcome back all. Now move procedural motion to reopen the meeting at 10:50 a.m. Have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Duff. Everyone's in favour, so we'll now progress. Item 7.5 is the Economic Support Instrument provision in the Planning Regulation 2017, can be found at 47. Some background, councillors, there's that amendments to the Planning Regulation 2017 were made on the 11th of September 2020 that seek to support the statewide economic recovery initiative by streamlining some statutory planning processes. So this is in response to the COVID pandemic and the government's economic recovery strategy. So council can has the under that regulatory change, council can make an economic support instrument for our local government area in accordance with 8B of the Planning Regulation 2017. The report outlines the detail around that, and the recommendation is that the committee recommends to council that the South Burnett Regional Council resolve to adopt an economic support instrument in accordance with Part 8B of the Planning Regulation 2016. Do we have a mover support that? Thank you, Councillor Shoemaker, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Jones. Might hand over to you, General Manager, to provide a summary of the background around this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Councillor Henshin highlighted this in his report, so changes to the regulation where we can adopt an economic support instrument. This is a temporary instrument, so over a 12-month period, so we've got from, I think it was September till September, the opportunity to effectively opt into this package, which is provided by the regulation. So the regulations then would override those provisions in the planning scheme that the instrument relates to. So I might just hand over to the Manager of Planning just to go through some of the details that was included in that. Just probably a brief summary for Council's information. You're right.
Oh, it's on already, sorry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Yes, so first of all, just to highlight that this process is non-mandatory. So in other words, council has the ability to opt in or not do anything. The second thing is that we don't have to adopt all of these economic provisions. So we can basically, for lack of a better term, pick and choose. And what we choose to include will depend on how our current planning scheme already reflects some of these provisions. And that's why we go through the process of what I call investigation. So we basically will review our current planning scheme provisions to confirm whether it already reflects some of these provisions. If not, we will then include that in the amendment package. And the whole idea is to remove red tape and make it easier, particularly post-COVID recovery, for people to continue or to get businesses off the ground. I must admit, I think compared to some other councils, our current planning scheme is fairly liberal. You go to other smaller councils and people have to make planning applications if they want to build sheds over a certain height and funny things like that. We got rid of all those peculiarities and stuff that we thought weren't necessary. So to the next council meeting, we will bring that investigation report. Council basically can adopt it, and we have to put a notice on our website. So we don't have to consult the minister about it. We don't have to undertake public consultation about it. And council can then revoke it at any point in time. So if a council discovers perhaps that these economic instruments or changes do not have the desired effect, council can just resolve to revoke them, or some of them. And the ideas building on this is I want to include these particular amendments in our broader planning scheme major amendment as well, so that they become a permanent part of our planning scheme. And I think this will give us a good opportunity to actually test or trial some of these provisions to see if they actually really have some impact. So I'll just move to, in terms of, in part two, just some of the requirements. So, and I've just got one example, one particular example there. There are more, but currently certain developments require impact assessment instead of code assessment. So, as council may know, impact assessment is a much longer, more complicated process. It involves public consultation. Classic example is the local centre zones. So that's the business areas of Blackbutt, Nanango, Wandai and Mergen. Kingroy is in the principal centre zone. A healthcare service, which is basically a doctor's surgery, currently requires an impact assessable application. If we adopt this instrument, that will change temporarily to code. So in other words, if somebody then wants to start up a doctor's surgery in Blackbutt, they just do a code application for the time that this instrument is in operation. The second one is where they talk about we increased the gross floor area of an existing building. Now, our current planning scheme allows people to just change tenancies, change a building in a commercial zone from an office to a shop, for example, without having to go through a planning approval. This adds in that you can actually extend the gross floor area by no more than 100 square meters or 10%. Now, that would be a help for us, because currently, if they change the GFA, they trigger a planning application. Under this provisions, they won't. So there are some planning schemes that trigger planning approval for certain building applications. A classic example would be Brisbane City Council, where if you want to change a house in a special character zone, you need a planning approval first. The only time our planning scheme triggers a Building approval is when somebody wants to demolish a building that's on a local heritage register place. It's really the only time that we trigger planning approval for that. Unfortunately, we can't remove that requirement. This instrument doesn't allow us to do that, but it allows for that 100 square metre, 10% expansion in GFA. So that's an example where we can sort of pick and choose, if you understand what I'm saying, and say, well, we think our scheme already reflects this, but not that. That was the third. And then the last one is really in relation to home-based business. Now, currently in our planning scheme, and be mindful, a home-based business is a business that doesn't meet any other definition in the planning scheme. So you can't have, for example, a fanciful idea, maybe a restaurant as a home-based business. People think a home-based business is just a business I run from home. No, that's not the case. So, and this is why we're prosecuting people who undertake motor vehicle workshops from their homes, because it's an industrial activity. Our current planning scheme have certain requirements in terms of size and hours of operation and those sort of things. If we adopt this, there would only be two requirements: is it can't be an industrial activity, and you need to meet the EPA noise policy. And that's basically it. So home-based businesses, a bed and breakfast is a home-based business. So currently we're saying you can only have 5 bedrooms in your house. Up to 5 bedrooms is a home-based business. That falls away. If somebody's got a house with 10 bedrooms, they can have a bed and breakfast in there, for example. We have a maximum restriction of 50 square metres on the floor area of home-based business, for example. If this is adopted, that falls away. So you can stay in one room and the rest of the house is home-based business, basically. So we need to consider, and this trial period will give us the opportunity to consider whether that's really an issue, or maybe if we need a bit more controls on a home-based business, for example. Home-based business does not trigger planning approval at the moment. There are just requirements that people need to meet, and those requirements were written into the planning scheme to ensure that we don't have an impact on the surrounding community, basically. Yeah, I think that's in a nutshell the process, councillors. Very simplified process, and it just allows us to adopt that, and it's a temporary instrument, basically. And it overrides what our current planning scheme. So if we assess a development or a development inquiry, we just have to have regard to both our planning scheme and this. And if there's an inconsistency, this economic instrument will prevail. That's basically in a nutshell.
Thank you, Manager. Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just through you a question, just in terms of the instrument, you said it's opt-in and we can pick and choose what items we like. So is there an opportunity for council to maybe workshop that further, or are you suggesting we actually adopt the instrument in its entirety and then, based on the learnings, pick and choose? I just want to confirm the process.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I think at this stage, our thinking is once we've done the review, is to adopt all the provisions in this instrument that's not currently in our planning scheme. Because the ones that obviously are already reflected, we won't adopt. But our current thinking is yes, let's adopt all of them. And this gives us an opportunity to have a trial period. If there's significant issues, like I said, council can just by resolution remove it. So it's not a long, convoluted process like a major planning scheme amendment. It's fairly easy to change it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Manager du Plessis. I agree. I've had a good look at the instrument and the process, the report you put forward, and I'm fully supportive of this. I think any opportunity to simplify for our local businesses, make things simpler, is a good thing, and certainly any opportunity to propose any red tape is welcome. So I think further to your comments before about the planning scheme being a living document and something that we regularly need to review and refine, and I think this is a great opportunity to put some new thinking into our planning scheme, and certainly I welcome the trial. So I'm fully supportive of this. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Shoemaker. And similarly, I'd like to put forward, I'd like to speak for the motion that this is an opportunity for us between now and September of this year to, as you said, perhaps enable some economic stimulation by freeing up some of that red tape that currently exists around some of those proposed developments. Further to our development incentive scheme, this could be another opportunity for us to do that. So I'd certainly agree with Councillor Shoemaker. It's a wonderful opportunity. Any councillors wish to speak again for or against, or have any questions?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I'm 100% supportive of it. Does it start as soon as we adopt this, like today, or after the formal council meeting? And then we need to it's a huge opportunity to get some more media around, you know, to on top of what the other incentives to add this. I think it's a wonderful initiative, and yeah, I think we need to really push it.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Duff. Mr CEO, we can take that on board and articulate, have that conversation with our media team about making sure that the community are aware that Council is embracing a range of initiatives to support economic development and recovery in our region, both including our development incentive scheme, which now has been well and truly in place, along with the adoption of, should that be adopted at the ordinary meeting. Following that, we could certainly get some media around that to make the community aware that Council has embraced the economic support instrument. So, okay, right, councillors, those in favour? Pass unanimously. Thank you all, and thank you very much, Manager, for that very good overview of those provisions. We'll now move on to waste management, and item 8.1 at 51 is the waste management portfolio report, and it's now my pleasure to hand over to Councillor Froloff to present such. Thank you, Councillor Froloff.
Thank you, Mayor. Waste in general. Waste Services have been focusing on the current budget review, developing the 2021 budget, progressing the capital work program and defining waste asset service levels. Construction of the new automated waste transfer station in Maidenwell. Waste Services have been able to make contact with the property owner adjacent to the Maidenwell transfer station to discuss sale of the land for the purpose of relocating the Maidenwell transfer station. Waste Services now needing to clarify some aspects of vegetation clearing and main roads requirements. Waste Compliance Officer position. Waste Services, in conjunction with the North Burnett Regional Council and Cherbourg Aboriginal Shire Council, were successful in obtaining a state government grant for a fixed-term position for up to 6 months to focus upon illegal dumping and littering within the 3 jurisdictions. It is hoped that as a result of this injection of resources, that there will be a significant improvement in the level of illegal dumping and littering within the 3 council areas. This officer should be on the ground early in 2021. And e-waste recycling. As part of Council's waste management strategy to make additional recycling options available to the public, Council's Waste Services have been successful in negotiating the introduction of a free e-waste recycling service to our 4 major waste facilities within the South Burnett. E-waste refers to old televisions, computers and computer-related products that no longer work or are obsolete. Disposal of e-waste through Council's regular waste collection services is not encouraged, and recycling of e-waste can often be difficult as they contain materials that require specialised recycling. E-waste can be deposited for recycling in dedicated e-waste skip bins located at the Kingaroy, Murgon, Wondai and Anango waste facilities. The dedicated e-waste skip bins are able to accept the following: televisions, including plasma televisions, cathode ray television, CRT televisions, liquid crystal displays, LCD television, and rear projection televisions. Computer equipment including portable processing machines, example, laptops, notebooks, and palm tops. Desktop central processing units, computer monitors, printers, multifunction devices that print, copy, scan, or fax, cards and motherboards, web cameras, compact disk drives, digital video disk drives, hard drives, floppy drives, mouse and trackball scanners, keyboards, joysticks and gamepads, and electrical transformers designed to be housed in the same cabinet as a CPU. In addition to the typical e-waste, these skip bins are also able to accept small electrical items with the power source including power tools, kettles, microwaves, heaters, toasters and hairdryers. The implementation of the e-waste recycling at Council's major waste facilities shall make it easier for the South Bennett residents to dispose of their e-waste and complements Council's participation in the mobile muster program, where old mobile phones are able to be deposited in designated receptacles at Council's customer service centres. I'd like my portfolio to be accepted through Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Froeloff. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Shoemaker. It's an excellent report. Isn't it wonderful to see that we've now got another initiative as part of our recycling program, that it's starting to get some traction now, and congratulations to the staff involved in implementing the e-waste recycling. You'll be looking forward to putting some media around this in coming weeks to get that message out to the community on that wonderful initiative. Councillors, do you have any questions, comments in relation to the report? Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I certainly agree with your comments. I think the e-waste and certainly is a great thing for our region. I just wondered if possible, just a question through you perhaps in terms of how that's processed or managed, like where it's actually taken from our sites and how often that occurs.
All you. Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you, Councillor. So basically, it is on a demand basis. So as they fill up, we can contact the contractor who will come out to collect. So if we are inundated by a whole heap of residents who actually want to get rid of their e-waste, which we hope we will be, then it's just a case of contacting the contractor. They will come out because they're actually seeking this particular type of waste stream, because there's a lot of essential metals in these products that, yes, the process for recycling them is quite extensive, but there is some good value items to be obtained at the back end of the process. So that's why they're taking anything and everything under this e-waste banner, which is fantastic. If it was very specific what they could take, then that would be a little bit more difficult, I think, to superintend. But for all intensive purposes, from that exhaustive list that Councillor Froeloff read out, we'll take it. So this contractor has a base in southeast Queensland. I don't know if they actually process it there locally or whether it actually gets shipped internationally, but it is a reputable company and the items are being recycled.
Thank you, Manager. Councillor Shoemaker, thank you.
Mr Mayor.
I just wanted to, if we could also just focus on the Waste Compliance Office position. First of all, congratulations to the three councils in working collaboratively to obtain the funding for the position, for that fixed term position for up to 6 months. It's a wonderful initiative. We sadly, I feel, have seen even throughout the course of COVID, probably an escalation in the amount of littering that we've seen as we've had higher volumes of people moving through our region on our roadsides. I'm sure that our slashing contractors would tell you there's a fair bit of rubbish that gets littered onto our roadsides and also sometimes around our dumps. Of course, Council has moved now to a situation where all of our dumps are open 7 days a week, albeit some of them for half days. So in my view, there's no excuse for people to dump their rubbish outside one of our dump facilities. And of course, our transfer stations are also open for public use. So congratulations to the three councils on working together to make that happen. And I just wonder if I could get an update as to, are we progressing the appointment of that at the moment, General Manager? The appointment of that person to that position?
Yeah, the position is currently being advertised. I think closing very shortly, if it hasn't.
Thank you very much, General Manager. So anyone looking for a position in council, in our waste department, waste compliance officer, it'll be advertised shortly. So well done. Thank you very much. Okay, councillors, no further questions or comments. Those in favour that the committee receive the report for information? Thank you. Passed unanimously. On to 8.2 at 53, the Environment and Waste Services Update. And councillors, you have a copy of that document there. It has quite a comprehensive presentation of the work that's been undertaken and some of the statistics around environment and waste services. So councillors, I might just allow you to work through that, but the recommendation is that the Environment and Waste Services Update be received for information. Do we have a mover for such? Thank you, Councillor Fowler, for the seconder. Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillors, questions, observations in relation to the report? Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just through you, just to the General Manager. The general local law unsightly, signage, there's 116 been 116 people put in a request to do with signage. Just wondering, is that only signage or is that just people complaining about unsightly properties? That's the first question. And the supplementary question is, if it is about unsightly properties, I know that it's hard to determine what is regarded as unsightly, and we've had these conversations before. And is it necessary for us, for council laws, to put something forward that we can put as a local law to clarify what is and isn't unsightly?
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Mr Mayor. So this particular category is our catch-all category for everything else that doesn't fit nice and neatly into another classification. So it is a combination of signage, complaints, visual amenity, and any other general local law inquiry that we may get from time to time. So that's what that category relates to. In relation to your second question about what is the criteria used to determine what is unsightly, what is not, that's probably covered in one of the other reports that we've got coming to this standing committee about illegal occupation, because normally unsightly, illegal occupation unfortunately go hand in hand. So we're proposing that council develop a policy around what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, and that will hopefully be able to clearly or more clearly identify what is going to be okay and what is deemed unacceptable.
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor. I have read what's coming, but I think that that's more about the building compliance as opposed to the backyard where there's, over the years, we've had like cars that are just dumped in residences and different bits and bobs that are not to do with actually the actual building itself, rather stuff in the backyard where they can't actually mow because it's just stuff everywhere. That kind of, I'm talking about a different section.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, that is a slightly different issue. I think, Councillor Duffy, you're talking about if we did introduce a local law that limited the number of vehicles in your backyard could be no more than 4. We have situations where, as a hobby, people will do up old cars or something and might have 16 bits and pieces of a car to make up 2, and we have had issues with those. So that's probably as part as when we go through the local law review, if council did want to look at specific limitations that would provide a quantitative assessment on things like that rather than the qualitative, and that's where you do have the issue is what I might think is unsightly, then our car nut CEO might think that that's fine. So yeah, that's probably a process we can go through as a local law and probably identify a couple of those issues. Yep.
If I may, Mr Mayor, through you, just make a quick comment too. In an ideal world, having a very clear-cut identification that any more than 4 cars might be a problem. would be nice to be able to enforce, but and I suppose this is the reason why the model local laws have never been overly specific, because there may be an occasion when somebody, if that was where you put the cut-off, there could be a situation when someone's got 3 cars is a mess, as opposed to someone who could have 5 cars, but they might be nicely and neatly parked up, maintained around. And so in that instance, you may then enforce against someone who's got 5, but it's not necessarily a problem when someone who could have 3 or 2 could actually be causing a problem. So I suppose that's why that model local law has been worded in a more of a vague reference, so that it doesn't narrow you down into a situation where you potentially couldn't take action if you believe that the circumstances were such that it was necessary that you needed to. I just probably provide that by way of a sort of a balance.
Yes, thank you, Manager. But what we're saying here is that the current local law, do you feel it provides sufficient scope for your officers to make that qualitative assessment that, well, it's not really about the number of items in the yard, it's about the unsightliness or the substantial area that's been covered? Is there enough scope in the local law to allow you to make your officers to make that judgment call without having to be, it's not too prescriptive at this point in time?
So, Mr. Mayor, to answer that, the local law talks about you can't create a visual amenity problem. So what is a visual amenity problem? Is that 4 cars? Is it overgrown grass? Is it the fact that the front facade of the house, it has paint peeling off it, and the house looks tired and needs a spruce up or a repaint? It could be a whole range of those things, and I suppose when we get these complaints, the officer tries to have a look in the context of where that property is. So if it's in a CBD area or in a residential suburbia, what's the rest of the houses like in that street? What is the extent of the amenity of that particular property? Is the yard overgrown? Is there a whole heap of kids' toys, broken kids' toys strewn throughout the place, spilling over onto the footpath? The house is all dilapidated, might be falling down in bits and pieces in places, and they would look at try and form an opinion on a holistic approach rather than necessarily focusing on one particular thing. And I suppose that's also is a bit relative to your perspective on. Some people will look at something and think that's okay. Another person will look at that and say, no, that's totally unacceptable. So it's trying to have a position that's defendable. If council takes certain action, like if we serve a notice on a property to say we believe this to be visually unpleasing and it's causing a detriment to the amenity of the area, if that gets to a court of law because the person's contesting it and it's before a magistrate, do we have a sufficient evidence to be able to support the allegation that's being made that this place is unacceptable and is detracting from the amenity of the area? So if you just went on one particular thing, you may not have such a great case, but it's on a range of things that we would look at. And I know that I specifically haven't directly answered your question. I just put that by way of background to come to the point that in some respects, if it was very cut and dry, no more than 4 cars, house must not be unkept, grass can't be overgrown, can't have more than X number of kids' toys in the yard, that'd be great to enforce, because the guys would go along and go, doesn't comply, doesn't comply, doesn't comply, doesn't comply, and we issue the notice. However, that may not be the case in every instance. And so the last thing you want to do is just because say a resident who there might be a neighbourhood issue between 2 properties wants to get on to a particular aspect of a local law that says you can't have more than 4 cars, but there's 5 cars there, so then they want council to enforce against that individual when the keeping of those 5 cars may not actually be a problem. So just because it then says 5 cars, council may very well be obliged to enforce that particular aspect of its local law. So on the one hand, having it a bit vague provides discretion to council that we don't action every particular complaint that comes in because it may be unreasonable. But then in those instances where it's clearly bad, unacceptable, not just to to an independent person's assessment, but we feel that there's adequate evidence to clearly say, look, we think that the magistrate would find this to be an unacceptable situation, that the local law, being in its present form with that sort of vague perspective, does provide that discretion, as opposed to if it's black and white, then you enforce it as is.
Yeah, thank you, Manager. Appreciate that response to my question. I'll come back to you shortly, Councillor. Councillor Potter?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm not too sure who this one's to be put to, but you've got abandoned vehicles down here. Does that include vehicles abandoned by the roadside? Because we all know about that one going into Mergen that's probably not in a good spot, that's now got the back window smashed in. And I had another phone call about that one this morning. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thanks for the question, Councillor. Through you, Mr Mayor. So if a car breaks down for one reason or another and it's on the side of the road, council can't necessarily intervene straight away unless it is a road safety issue. If it's causing a road safety issue, it can be removed summarily. If it is parked legally, is registered motor vehicle, then we can't, in the first instance, do anything about that. We normally liaise with the police. They are able to do a search, find our owner. They normally contact them and say, is there a reason for your motor vehicle to be on the side of the road? Oh yeah, mate, it broke down. When are you planning on having it moved? It might be within the next couple of days or whatever. If it's out of registration and the owners are unable to be contacted, then it becomes deemed an abandoned vehicle, in which case we then have a process where we refer to it as being stickered. So we have a fluorescent orange-yellow sticker that goes on the vehicle that more or less gives notification to the owner, wherever they might be, that within 3 days we will have this vehicle impounded and removed from the road. If you want it before then, feel free to move the car. Alternatively, you need to come and find us and talk to us, because it'll be impounded otherwise. So unfortunately there is a process, because once again people have rights with regards to their property, and unless it is a road safety issue, that we can intervene in a more quicker manner.
I suppose as a follow-on to that, the fact is that that vehicle's been on that road to Mergen for, I would say, how long, Kathy? Nearly a month? Over a month. And during that time, it's we've seen the gradual degradation, I suppose, of that vehicle, and it really can't be good, and it's not in a good spot either, to be quite honest. So is there, what is happening with that vehicle?
Yeah, so I suppose the other part of that, what constitutes a road safety issue? Because that vehicle is quite close to the highway, and where if a driver was to sort of drop off the edge, would not be difficult to make contact. It could potentially sideswipe that vehicle.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm certainly aware of the vehicle, not aware where we're up to in the process of that, or whether it has been reported through to council through that process. We can take that on notice and follow it up.
Yeah, General Manager, I did submit a custom request on this probably at least 4 weeks ago, if not longer. And I know it has been contentious for the community. So it's certainly got a visual amenity problem in its own right, as well as potentially a safety issue. Yeah.
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor, just probably Pete's not aware, we picked this up with Craig a few weeks back, so it'll go through appropriate notice period. So it's actually on a TMR corridor. So our team is working with QPS, Craig and TMR to serve that driver with notice. I just mentioned to the council before, I went through there the other day, the owner of the vehicle was actually back there in the vehicle a couple of weeks ago, probably 2 weeks ago. Don't know why, so we're not sure what that reason is. So what we'll look to do is, obviously, if we pick some of these up on our inspections where the vehicle's been there for some time on the corridor, we'll probably look to get a bit of a process in place where we can make contact through Craig and his group to try and resolve some of those issues.
Yeah, I think what we're hearing probably from Council General Manager is that certainly if we could streamline a process of communication between the two departments to try and respond to these things through your inspection program, as you're saying, that'd be tremendous. We're trying to develop the livability of our region, and when we see tourists coming through, seeing those sorts of unsightly images of bashed up cars on the sides of the road, it doesn't present well for our region. Without even going to the issue of road safety. It's also a vehicle on a private, of course, vehicles on private property, I'd imagine, Manager, we can't intervene in those. I know that there's one at Warrulan on that private property just before the bend on the left, and I suspect that perhaps Transport or the police have put that there maybe to remind people of the dangers of roads. But again, it provides a little bit of it doesn't probably look too great for our region when people travel through. Just wanting to make that observation at this stage. Not sure if there's anything we can do in working with the police around where they place those and the effect it has on the visual amenity of our region.
So in response to that question, Mr Mayor, if it is on private property, yeah, we can't sort of summarily go in and remove the thing. If we believe it to be a significant visual amenity issue, then we could certainly follow that up with the owner in the first instance, just more or less have a conversation. Is that your car? Did you put it there? How long? What are your intentions with it? How long are you planning on leaving it there for? And like you say, if it was something that one of the emergency services have put there, they might be there for a particular reason. But yeah, look, we can certainly have that conversation with the property owner to find out what the go is with the car. And just in relation to that other one at Mergen, the hold-up might be if it is actually still registered motor vehicle, that's why it's probably still there. And it may very well be deemed that, yes, it's on the side of the road, but it's not, in its present location, a significant road safety issue.
Yeah, Manager, with my customer request, I expected that it was registered, so I could see and understand that that's probably why it's taking a period of time to get something resolved with that. Yeah, fully understand. Thank you. Councillor Duff?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've also got one in Palmer Street that's upside down in the street, so I've also sent that one through as a request. Yeah, but that's, I just want to, just to back on the unsightly blocks, I was just wondering, is it possible for an investigation into what other councils do across Queensland on unsightly blocks? Like there must surely be some local laws that address a service, like a standard, and if a report could come back to the next standing committee around what other councils do and what's some options for us. Is that something that I could put forward?
No, we'll note it, Mr Mayor. Just if we've got to engage with other councils, given short month of February, it's probably, you may not get that one back for March. That would be the only thing. Yeah, probably April.
Yeah, so could I suggest that we give the officers time to bring that back to the April Standing Committee meeting, Mr General Manager, Mr CEO, in accordance with your advice, a report on some research around what other councils are doing in this local laws, whether they're adopting the model local law or whether other councils have more advanced local laws in this space. That'd be appreciated. Thank you. Okay. The only other thing I wanted to make an observation on was that in the comparative data year to date, so if we look at waste collection services conducted by our council, in last financial year to this point in time, to the end of January, for 7 months last year, we had 365,000, roughly 365,000 waste collection services. This year, for the same period, we've done 381,000. So that's a fairly significant increase. Mightn't seem like much on paper, but that's an extra 16,000 waste collection services over 7 months. So just shows the amount of work that gets done in this space. Thank you. And again, thank you very much, General Manager and Manager, for the work that you're doing and keeping that working so efficiently. Okay, councillors, so we've got the report at hand. The motion is that the Environment and Waste Services update be received for information. Councillor Duff, you've had 2 opportunities to speak.
Sorry,
I normally wouldn't allow a third.
I just wondered if addition can be put to that a report be put back to the April meeting, that was all.
Oh, no, Councillor Duff, I'm quite comfortable that the CEO has noted such, and we'll make sure that happens in April. So the resolution is as tabled. Are those in favour? The motion says passed unanimously. Thank you all. Okay, let's move on now to the overgrown allotment enforcement report at 56. It's item 8.3. And a bit of background here, and the current standard practice and enforcement of properties that are deemed to be overgrown, and how council responds to these complaints, how it implements its proactive program in seeking out and identify allotments in breach of council's local laws, and how it undertakes enforcement in this regard needs to be reviewed. As such, the recommendation is that this committee recommends to council that council approve a review into the overgrown allotment operations of council with a view to a stricter enforcement protocol. It's my pleasure to move such. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Duff. Council, we'll now go into discussion on the matter. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, ask any questions. General Manager, please feel to provide some commentary around this as well. So I'll open the floor to that now. Councillors. Councillor Duff, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm really keen to support this, and I'm also keen to support if we need to resource it, a more proactive approach to this rather than sometimes I think because we're under-resourced, staff are relying on council customer requests rather than some of those repeat offenders just actually going out and starting the process. I know it's a long process to get those overgrown allotments under control, to actually speed up the process by taking a proactive response. If we need to resource it, I'm keen to see that happen.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you all. And thank you, Manager, for that recommendation to committee. Okay, move on to 8.4 at 58, illegal occupation on private land. Background on this is that council needs to adopt a policy position of aspects of illegal occupation on private land, namely where an approved Class 1A building structure, such as a house, is not established and persons are residing at or are attempting to live at the property. The recommendation is that the committee recommends to council that council approve the development of an illegal occupation on private land policy, procedure and enforcement strategy. Do we have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Froloff. A seconder. Thank you, Councillor Henson. Councillors wishing to speak for or against, ask questions. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, all I just want to make one comment is that this is an area that has the potential to affect a lot of people in our region. So this is something that we need to address very carefully, and we've spoken about this on a number of different occasions in the last term of council, and it's been a hot topic here, and I've just sat through all these the other items on the agenda there, and I think it's appropriate that we need to understand that this will affect not just hundreds but thousands and thousands of people. So that's all I want to do, is just make everybody aware and bring to the attention that this is not just a couple of people, it is a lot of people that we're referring to here.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Jones, and to follow on from that, as long as there is something within that policy to do with the health and welfare of the people, because we don't want to be seen as the council that kicks people off their own land, really. So we really need to do something in that space for the health and well-being of the people.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. And I'm sure, as our officers always do, they'll consult carefully with councillors, and perhaps even run a workshop, providing you with an opportunity to share that information with the officers in bringing forward their report to council as to a proposed policy. Okay, Councillor Duff, anything to add before we go to the vote?
Yeah, I 100% agree with Councillor Jones and Councillor Potter, but I do think that by having a policy we can start to address some of what my real concerns are about safety issues, and health issues have been identified to me where people are in gullies and things like that. So I'm not wanting to be a heavy-handed council, but I certainly think we need to have a policy around how we're going to manage that.
Councillor Froloff.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I totally agree with the rest of the councillors, but I have had some concerns, especially in my area, that people have come up to me, and yes, we are very concerned about the health and safety of people on some of these lands. But then we've also got other places that they just repeat offenders. and on blocks of land that have gone from place to place to place. And I totally agree with Councillor Duff that we don't want to be heavy-handed, but at least we've got somewhere to go now. Thank you.
Yeah, well said, Councillor Froelich. I certainly agree with your comments there. Okay, councillors, those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you all. Item 9.1 at 62 is the Rural Resilience, Parks and Gardens, Property and Facility Management and Indigenous Affairs Portfolio Report. It's now my pleasure to hand over to Councillor Duff to present such. Thank you, Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So the first item is rural resilience. Council has been working with BIEDO to utilise a portion of the drought funding to employ Alan Broome as a drought resilience officer. He has been coordinating the grazing network meetings, attending cattle sales and any rural-related activities he has been able to get to. He has been getting a lot of traction and is collecting a large data of information that will go into the Drought Adverse Events Plan, which should be available towards the end of May. In Parks and Gardens, after the welcome rain that fell across our region during December and January, our Parks and Garden crews have been kept very busy trying their best in keeping our towns maintained. The rain has been patchy throughout the region but has given relief and has lifted community spirits, and it is so lovely to see the colour green again. However, this also brings added pressures to the Parks and Garden staff as the grass has responded to the favourable growing conditions, and yes, the grass has had the upper hand until now. Council has taken measures to combat and assist our staff by changing the mowing cycle and engaging contractors to assist during this period. Christmas trees and street banners have been dismantled across the region. Rail trail has been swept and slashed. Planting of vacant garden beds with perennials will commence in the coming weeks. Park staff are continuing with their schedules for weed eating, spraying, toilet cleaning and rubbish collections throughout the region. COVID-19 signage remains in all parks and amenities. Cleaning processes are still being undertaken by contractors and park staff on each clean. Playground equipment is high pressure cleaned and disinfected monthly. Customer requests, Council, NRM and park staff have been updating outstanding customer requests which dated back to 2014, which are now 95% completed. Additional admin staffing has allowed this to be undertaken. Sorry. Must be something missing. Yeah, so, but I've got this, just goes new systems. Oh, yeah, but it just starts new systems. New systems procedures have been implemented to ensure that customer councils are updated to the status of the request within reasonable timeframes moving forward. Aerodromes. Twice weekly inspections are continuing at the Kingaroy Airport. NOTAM remains in place advising aircrafts of extended wildlife activity. Council's airport reporting officer is continuing to run the strip as requested by the Royal Flying Doctor Service prior to landing due to the kangaroo issues at the Kingaroy Airport. The annual electrical technical inspection checklist has been undertaken at the Kingaroy Airport with no issues detected. Cemeteries. Ongoing general maintenance is continuing in all cemeteries across the region with garden planning to be undertaken in Mergen and Wandai cemeteries in the coming weeks. Dams. I'd like to congratulate the managers and their staff at Lake Bunduma and Bjelke Peterson Dams for their efforts over the Christmas New Year period, with occupancy numbers peaking on New Year's Eve at both facilities. Entertainment was provided at both dams by local artists to see the New Year in, which was well received by guests. And there's a graph there with Lake Bunduma up 2,034 and Bjelke Peterson up by 1,598. Property and Facility Management. Council has engaged heritage consultants to assist Bunduma Museum and Heritage Association Inc. and Council in preparing a heritage report and seeking heritage approvals from state government to undertake restoration works within the timber homestead and on the homestead roof. The homestead roof has recently started to leak, causing water damage within the timber ceiling. Also, heritage consultants have been engaged to provide advice on the Mergen Town Hall heritage shops regarding the removal of walls, re-roofing, replacing guttering and assessing the original paint colour of the building. This advice will assist Council in preparing future maintenance works and seeking heritage approvals from the Queensland Government. Council has engaged local contractors to re-roof the Nanango Energy Centre. Works are scheduled to commence on the 11th of February. Further works for Queensland Round 4 projects will commence over coming months as tenders, quotations, building designs and building approvals areas are finalised. Council will be closing the South Burnet Aquatic Centre for a 5-week period to undertake necessary maintenance and capital works. Council has worked with the local pool manager to close the pool while the other 5 pools remain open for the remainder of the swimming season. To maintain this aquatic centre and make future improvements to the bathrooms, replacing of expansion joints, installing new solar heating and replacing chlorine tank, it is necessary that the pool closes. Council is sorry for the inconvenience but looking forward to a safer and improved facility when it reopens. Council property officers are preparing 2 Building Better region funding submissions supporting community groups with lease inquiries and supporting funding submissions. Indigenous Affairs, our council travelled to Cherbourg and met with Cherbourg Council on 21st of January. We've now set up a monthly get-together with myself, the Mayor, Councillor Bronwyn Murray and GMO May to work on a reconciliation action plan. We are also meeting with Neil Stanley on the same day to continue discussions on a proposal for a yarning circle in Mergen. I'm on the steering committee for the Mergen to Cherbourg footpath project. As part of that project, our council is working on a joint funding application for a footbridge over Sawpit Creek. Our council is also working with Cherbourg Council to advocate to have Cherbourg Road upgraded to a state-controlled road. I'd like to move my report. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Duff. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Potter. Just a little bit of commentary, observations there. First of all, in relation to parks and gardens, there's a significant amount of planning work that's being undertaken by General Manager O'May and Manager Watt in this space. So our council, under the direction of our CEO, has taken a very sophisticated approach in how we address the need to reform our parks and gardens process. It cuts across a range of issues. It's not just about simply throwing additional resources at the matter. And Manager Watt has been going through a very robust process of analysing the work patterns, analysing the human and physical resource requirements, having conversations with team members around work practices to find efficiencies and to come back to council with a very thorough, well-researched and complete report as to what's going to be required so that we get this right for the long term. We don't start jumping in and making rash decisions that will maybe well and good for the short term, but not good for the long-term delivery of the service level that council's seeking. So I just wanted to make that clear to council and to the community that Manager Mark has been doing a significant amount of work in this space, and I will hand over to you shortly, Manager, to share some of that with us. Also, of course, as we can see there, isn't it great to see the tourist parks, the dams doing so well? And you can see there that this 7 months last year, 945 occupants at BP Dam. In the same 7 months this year, 2,543. Now, by my numbers, that's just under a 200% increase for the 2-month period. Boondooma went up last year 2,742 in that 2 months. This year, 2,700 to 4,700. So, you know, that's about an 80% increase in those 2 months at Lake Boondooma. So that's a tremendous result. And congratulations to General Manager O'May, you and your team and your appointed managers. I just also want to make, particularly for community information, I wanted to articulate the reason for council closing the Nanango South Bend Aquatic Centre for a 5-week period during what the community regard as the peak season of summer. Now, and I'm sure Councillor Froloff can also elaborate on this, for the community's information, that our staff do that because of course, there is work that has to be done to make sure that we're maintaining and renewing the assets in that pool for the future use. But were that to be done in winter time, there would be no other pools open around the South Burnett. So the reason it's being done now is so that those that would normally use the Nanango swimming pool can go, for example, to Kingaroy, or they could go, I mean, if they wanted to, they could even go down to Yarraman, I suppose, and use the pool there. So that's the reason council has done that. It wasn't a decision that was taken rashly, but it was done at what we believe is the best time of the year to do it while other swimming pools are open. So I just want to make sure that is clearly communicated to the community. And Councillor Froloff, did you want to add anything to that, or have I pretty well summarised that?
You've pretty well summarised that, Mayor. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So couple of points there. Councillor Froloff, did you want to add anything to that? You did have your light on at one stage, but you're happy. Have I covered that? Thank you. Councillor Potter, sorry. That's twice now. Good, Councillor. Yeah. So, Councillor Shoemaker, I haven't just been picking on you. I've called Councillor Potter, Councillor Froloff. Okay, getting back on track. Any other councillors wish to to add anything to that report at this stage? Questions, comments? If not, those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you all. And again, thank you to the Parks and Gardens staff and the facilities management staff for the work they've been doing there. Parks and Gardens update 9.2 at 65. Oh, do we have a barrier reef matter? Sorry. Have I missed something, Councillor?
Sorry, Mr Mayor, I just wanted to move a motion off the floor. Is that okay? So I'd like to move that South Burnett Regional Council put in a submission to the state government requesting that the South Burnett region be left out of the proposed Great Barrier Reef catchment area.
We have a seconder. Thanks, Councillor Shoemaker. Speakers for or against?
Yes, Mr Mayor. So the reason for this is that the submissions are closing on the 17th of February, which is only a week away. Last night, Councillor Henson and Councillor Potter and Councillor Shoemaker and I attended a huge meeting in the town hall. There was over 160 people there, an ag network meeting, and it was all about the reef catchment and the financial ramifications and also the stressful ramifications of our region, that there's going to be a lot of red tape around us being part of that catchment area. There's going to be a lot of requirements for farmers that are doing new cropping, even existing crops, about setback areas. There's all sorts of issues about being part of the Great Barrier Reef catchment area. We feel, or the general feeling of the meeting last night was that our area is not close enough to the Great Barrier Reef to have any input into the catchment area, like any significant damage to the catchment area. So, yeah, we're wanting to try and get it completely left out of the catchment area to try and support our farmers. It's into the future. Alan Broom was there and he was saying that it's going to have impact on our even our valuations into the future, because people will choose to go somewhere else with their farming practices if they don't, where they don't have to have all these rules and regulations around being part of that catchment area. So keen to have this supported. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Duff, for putting this on the table. I'm fully supportive. I also understand our local member, Deb Frecklington, did move an amendment when the legislation was passed to have the South Burnett excluded from these guidelines. So I'm fully supportive of the motion. I think it's Council, we need to take a strong stance on this. There are serious implications for agricultural users across our region, and certainly we heard those loud and clear last night in the town hall. So fully supportive of this, and certainly would like to see Council take a very strong stance in being left out of these proposed guidelines. There's still a lot of question marks around how they'll be implemented, how they'll be regulated, and quite frankly, I think it's very important we take this strong stance against them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shoemaker. Councillor Henson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Fully support this, and Councillor Duff and Councillor Shoemaker, but can I just, for the record, be noted that and our member, Deb Frecklington, wonderful what she proposed, but our statistics will show and prove that the South Burnett water barely ever gets to the reef. I mean, let's be realistic, and our figures can prove that. The last time significant water went down that waterway was 2013, so to have the South Burnett excluded in this, I would have thought would be just a given. It's ridiculous to think that our agricultural sector here has got any effect, if any, on the reef and what was proposed last night. So 100% supportive of Councillor Duff's recommendation. So, yeah, and I'd just like to repeat, South Burnett's water would seldom ever get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. If I could just put some questions. Councillor Duff, you've moved the motion. First of all, Mr CEO, the wording of the motion.
Can I just, if I may, Mr Mayor, the standing committees don't carry the delegation, so we'll just need that the committee recommends to council at the beginning of it. That doesn't mean that this can't be actioned, but rather than put in a submission, support a submission. I can then action this in between this and the general, and then council can endorse that action at the general. It's a minor point, but it just legalises it. Put in becomes support a submission. And then also, if there's any other agencies such as AgForce or someone like that that council's happy to support, we can march on our merry way that way. It would be support a submission. Well, there would be multiple, I would hope, yeah. So that also gives us that broad, if someone else is chasing a letter of support or something, as I said, we can get this action then, so before the closing date, before next week, and then you just endorse it at the general.
Right, very good. Thanks, Mr. CEO. I have a couple of questions of this. I'm not convinced. Councillor Duff, can I ask the parliamentary committee, there would have been a parliamentary committee assigned to the development of the process of proceeding the bill. Were we given an opportunity? Did we make representation as a region to the parliamentary committee in relation to the impact on our region? Do we know?
I'm not sure that meeting last night was the first I'd been involved.
Not as a council.
Not as a council. Okay. Secondly, the local members' request for an amendment to the bill to exclude our regional area. Does anyone know what the response was from the government proposing the bill? Was there a reason why that wasn't accepted? Are there mitigating factors here that I don't understand? Was there environmental information, for example, that indicated that some of our waters do flow out at some point into the waters of the southern end of the reef, which I know isn't far from Bundaberg, which is only for a 2.5 hour drive from here. So I'd like some more evidence on this, to be honest.
That question was put on more than one occasion last night, and the presenters could not answer the questions. They actually took it on notice, and they were coming back to a further meeting around what impact it had.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. I just wanted to put to the floor that I won't be supporting this motion on the basis that there isn't sufficient scientific evidence to demonstrate to me that the economic cost to our region would outweigh the potential for environmental damage on the southern end of the Great Barrier Reef. And as a parent of grandchildren, I have significant concerns about the current state of the reef and the impact that water flows from freshwater supplies, from freshwater systems and chemical contamination is having on the reef, having watched several documentaries and having done some study in this space. I don't know if our water streams are contributing to that, to the southern end of the reef, but I do know that turtle habitats particularly are being affected around Monrepo and places at this point in time. So on that basis, I'll be probably, I certainly won't be supporting it without sufficient data to indicate that we definitely aren't impacting adversely on that. My understanding of the regulations are also that there is still provision for those wanting to cultivate uncultivated lands to obtain a permit, and that it's perhaps not all as prohibitive as what's been indicated in the media. I could be wrong, but that's what I've been, from the research I've done, is in fact the case. Happy to stand clarified. Thank you, Councillor Duff.
Mr. Mayor, what was put forward last night was not, it wasn't a walk in the park for farmers. To apply was, I think one application's over $600 to apply. It's not just about farmers that are actually cropping into the future. It's actually farmers that are cropping currently. It's about setbacks on gullies. It's all sorts of things. It's a can of worms. They were unable to answer most of the questions last night. It's very, very cloudy. I'm very concerned about the actual purpose of it, because you're saying, okay, that there's all this damage, but what they were saying last night was, if you crop and you're not doing it for a commercial purpose, you can still do whatever you like. If it's a commercial purpose, you have to put in this application for over $600. To me, it didn't appear to be about protecting the reef. It was about some people were in and some people were out, but you could still do the same damage. Like it was a red herring for me. I was just alarmed at how little they knew, how the presenters knew, and the whole ramifications for our region.
Councillor Duff, when you say they, are they state government representatives?
Yes, they were state government representatives who were presenting to the group.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Jones.
Just a quick question through you, Mr Mayor. I wasn't there, unfortunately, last night, but Councillor Duff, could you just, the presenters, they were speaking on behalf of the water that runs from the South Burnett or contributing to the damage of the reef. Was that what they were presenting on?
That they were just doing a broad overview of what the reef regulations meant to all farmers who were involved in this, not specifically to the South Burnett, so they were unable to answer anything specific to the South Burnett.
Right, other councillors before we go to the vote? Councillor Henson.
Yes, and as Councillor Duff has alluded to come to a presentation like that and not be able to answer rural primary producers' questions was, to me, being a primary producer, pretty dumbfounding. I'll stand here, with my primary producer hat on. And as Councillor Duff alluded to, the guidelines in the draft proposal was really quite disappointing. A red herring would be an understatement. To have guidelines or draft proposals in place stipulating over a 10-year period, these 3 years are incorporated into it, these 3 aren't, depending on what you did in that 3 years and what you grew and what you produced, whether you were commercial, whether you want to develop 5 acres of new land. And they couldn't answer any questions. So with my council hat on, I completely support Councillor Duff and Councillor Shoemaker and Councillor Potter. And our literature over time, and I'm sure if council goes back to look at our water levels and our megalitres and our usage and the water flow with annual rainfall records and take on board our primary producers' comments on that, I think the South Burnett and our member, Deb Freckington, has an extremely legitimate proposal to put the South Burnett under umbrella where we're excluded. So with Councillor Duff, I'm fully supportive of the South Burnett being put in an umbrella to be excluded with this. So I will support Councillor Duff on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Henson. Other councillors before we go to the vote? Okay, well, having heard your comments, I'll take my much more learned colleagues' rural experience on board in supporting it. Those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you all. Okay, now let's move on to item 9.2, which is the Parks and Gardens update at 65. And the recommendation is that the Parks and Gardens update be received for information. Do we have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Froelich. A seconder. Thank you, Councillor Potter. And I might go to you now, General Manager, Manager Watt. This is your opportunity to give us, elaborate more on the work that you've been doing in relation to developing the Parks and Gardens processes of council, and also an update on the work that's been happening across the region on many of these projects. Thank you, Manager.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So councillors can raise any questions about the Parks and Gardens update if you like, but in relation to the review of service levels, so we are currently initially looking at budget requirements to meet the budget timeline for Parks and Gardens initially. So we will devise staff numbers and resource requirements there, which I don't know whether they'll be significant or not, but I know there's been some issues about resourcing and working smarter and those sorts of things. So that will go through the budget process. But in terms of service levels, I guess effectively that will take some time based on the elements that make up Parks and Gardens. So initially we're going to look at mowing programs. So we're reviewing the mowing programs and come back to council and formally, I guess, decide on that mowing program based on the hierarchy of the parks. So that'll be an opportunity to initially discuss that process. We're going to be looking at how the villages fit into that mowing program and how they are in the hierarchy. So that will be another element. There's the CBD cleaning, which we're working close with infrastructure to decide on clarification of roles and responsibilities there. So again, that will come into the overall document, strategy if you like. Cleaning public amenities, we have existing cleaning schedules, so they will be revised and presented for, further consideration and clarification. The annual planting program, so we will look at, the Mayor has talked about a botanical master plan. So I think that's a good initiative. And what we would do is, if there was a botanical master plan for the region, which would take some time to develop, by the way, but we would link across our planning program to the botanical master plan, and that would, run in conjunction with that document, and that would, have a standard across the region. So we will even go down to the annual Christmas tree and decorative arrangements, to say in that service document that I promise I'll get those Christmas trees down by the first week in January, maybe even earlier. So, some sort of level of service and guarantees about how we, maintain the appropriateness or the continuity of those things. Okay, so cemeteries as well. I think the cemeteries have been held to a very high standard currently, and there are issues that still arise with various things where plaques can be damaged and those sorts of things. But in terms of the general maintenance, we have had those extra staff allocated to cemeteries, which has presented them nicely. Park furniture. So generally, we maintain park furniture on a basis whereby some things are deferred to quite a period, and if they're unsafe, they'll be immediately repaired. But that's a genuine, risk issue. But in terms of minor, cosmetic or, repainting or various things like that, those issues are deferred till the winter time, where the operations staff are, use their other skills to attend to those things. However, we will discuss how park furniture is maintained as part of the strategy. So we might, allocate higher priorities to that, or we may just use it as a resourcing issue or get external assistance. We'll have to see how that pans out. And really, I guess in conclusion for that whole overview, just trying to document the unspecified parts to what we do, and that is putting out chairs for events or internal requests to do this and to mow an area that we don't normally mow out of the kindness of our heart. So we need to document those things so that our mowing cycle is not virtually interrupted, so that work is done to the standard that we always try and maintain, and we incorporate those additional roles, which I would say are not totally significant, but they do interrupt and can delay the priorities that have previously been allocated. So that's just how we'd approach that. So that's the work in progress that we're doing. I hope to get on, we are working on that now. We will wait for the budget, and then we will come back to council with some initial guidance on those, the tiering of the parks and that sort of thing, and then we'll set about devising this, the strategy or documenting it. And that, in my view, I would describe it as saying, at the very top, it's decided by council at the service level, and it will filter right down to the labourer in the crib room in the depot to know that that's the document he's working off to fulfil the requirements of council service level. So it's got to be a totally integrated and tiered approach, so there's consistency. We're not going to get it right the first time, unfortunately. I don't like to say that, but it will take various elements or other aspects that will come in line as we go forward, and that is divesting ourselves of parks and reserves that we may, not want. You know what I'm saying there. We don't sell off everything, but we will rationalise some areas, and also improving the smarts of how we do things, and that is, as the infrastructure team have already highlighted, that's concreting median strips that we currently mow with a push mower, and we have to do traffic, so it takes us an hour to put the traffic out, 10 minutes to mow it, and then another hour to pull down the traffic. That's the smarter element. So it's a combination of all those things. So there's resourcing changes and there's working smarter, and being more organised. So that's just a summary of where we're going, really.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you very much,
thank
Manager.
You to the infrastructure team, who've been quite willing to assist in that because I know Aaron's had previous experience in that space. So, and we're obviously working closely with Peter to sort of just get that direction. So that's just where we're going there.
Yeah, and can I say, Manager, it's certainly been my observation that the parks and this is the body of work you're doing now is in response to something that's been an issue for not months but years in our region for some years, and this council is still within its first 12 months of its term. So to see you would have advanced that so rapidly in your time, having only been in the role now for less than, well, I think it's only a bit over a month, you've made significant advancements already, both in terms of what we're seeing on the ground and also what I know you've got happening in the back office in terms of the planning around all the things you've just spoken about. And I would say to the community that this is a work in progress. It's not perfect, it's a long way from it, and like the roads, it'll take us some time to get this worked through, but we are tracking towards a much improved standard of service around parks and gardens across the region. I thank you, General Manager and Manager, for the work you're doing. Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and certainly I'd just like to thank GM Peter and Manager Watt. Certainly it's pleasing to hear your report, so thank you for that. Sharing learnings is certainly the culture we want to see here at Council. Working smarter, not harder, absolutely. And I agree, it's not about perfection, but it's certainly about that hunger for continuous improvement, and it's pleasing to hear that that's on the case. In the conversations I've had, I believe we do have modest expectations. Our ratepayers have modest expectations in this space, and it's pleasing to hear that improvements have been made to long-standing issues and that we're finally getting on top of these. So thank you. I welcome further discussions in this space and just want to acknowledge the work that you have done over this past month. It's enormous and it's great to see the improvements on the ground. So thank you very much. I'd also like to acknowledge Councillor Duff, portfolio holder for Parks and Gardens, who's been working long and hard on this issue. And I know, Mr. Mayor, you've been supporting her in that. So thank you very much. I just, in regards to the update in the report before us, I just wanted to check. It seems there's been a number of funds reallocated for Kingaroy-based projects, that there's some work happening in confirming the scope for the Walter Road verge planting and upgrades under W4Q. And I just wanted to understand what's actually happening here in terms of those funds reallocation and in these projects that we identified. Particularly, I'm particularly interested in the projects for Kingaroy, being Division 4 councillor. So thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just that particular project, I think that should have said scope to be confirmed rather than scope confirmed. So we were keen to come back, and we are looking at coming back to council, just confirming the scope on that project in particular, and just a couple of others around some of our funding programs. Just looking at delays on certain projects, capacity to deliver. So this should have probably actually said scope to be confirmed on that one. I did see that when I was reading that as well. So we do want to come back and talk to council about that in the very near future.
Yeah, thank you, General Manager O'May. I certainly welcome that because, you know, as a councillor for Kingaroy, I've had a lot of discussions with people around these particular projects. And if money's moving and projects are moving, certainly appreciate an update. Also just wanted to check the funds to be reallocated for Kingaroy Lions Park. I understand it in discussions, previous workshops we had, they were going to Apex Park. So I just wanted an update as to where things are at with that. That was a CapEx project for the original playground renewal and paths. I thought we were going to reallocate that to Apex Park. So I'm curious where things are at because things seem to be moving around in this space.
I think it's probably best to do, and that's as part of the whole update, so we can bring everything back. Late last year, we did reallocate funding from some Works for Queensland stuff to Apex Park. The Lions Park Capital Project was reallocated to do some master planning around all of the works. It's not. There wasn't just one shift from lines to Apex. So I think to be fair to all of the council, I think we need to have the whole program, and that's the idea, is to come and work through so everyone is of the understanding of where each project is at and where we are looking at, because we've recently got some couple of allocations that we want to make sure that we are expending our grant funding first, so making sure we're giving priority to those externally funded projects which may see a delay for delivery of capital projects. So I think it's best if we bring that whole program back, and that was the idea. So.
Thanks, General Manager. If I could just clarify also that there has been no decision taken by the officers or council at this stage in relation to reallocation of any funds other pursuant to what was originally resolved by council. And at this stage, the staff are still working through timeframes around completion of projects to meet due dates, and also the fact that some of the cost estimates have changed on some of the projects, and also some of the community, I suppose, some of the things that we couldn't get done, the community have then come back and said, well, if we can't get that done, could we possibly do this other project? So the officers have been working through that with the community, working through time frames, working through budgets, and as General Manager O'May said, he'll be bringing a report back to council in the coming weeks to go through that in more detail at a workshop. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, councillors, anything else? Councillor Duff?
Sorry, I know you didn't want me to talk for very long because you're in a hurry, but I just wanted to have a big shout out to Parks and Gardens because you are starting to make a difference, and Councillor Jones should be very pleased at what's happened in Les Muller Park and the shade shelter and the seat, and I just wanted to thank you for what you've done so far, and looking forward to some great outcomes into the future.
Well said, Councillor Duff. Okay, those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you all. Okay, councillors, let's keep going. Now, items 9.3 and 9.4, Mr CEO, I'd probably seek your advice on those at this stage.
Mr Mayor, certainly through the General Manager and Councillor Duff, there's been feedback come back from the council and also in conjunction with the Mayor's community plan meetings that there may be further information that the staff weren't aware of when the reports were developed. Given that, it would be a request to leave both of those to lay on the table until that further information comes back. So to be just two procedural resolutions to quickly deal with them, and then we can consult with the councillor about the further information and work to bring back the report again.
Thank you, Mr CEO. As such, I'd move that items 9.3 and 9.4 lay on the table. I have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Duff. Those in favour? Procedural resolution passed unanimously. Thank you all. 9.5 is reserved for Park Walter Road, Kingaroy. Alternative use options at 81. And just a little bit of background there, councillors, is that we have a parcel of land, of which council is trustee. It's a reserve for park located at Walter Road, Kingaroy, and council has received ad hoc inquiries from commercial entities to purchase the land for commercial development. The reserve tenure is an impediment to development, and council is looking at alternative suitable land use options for the Park Incorporated community consultation on the project. As such, the recommendation is that the committee recommends to council that council investigate alternative land use options for reserve for park on Walter Road, Kingaroy, being lot 1 on RP 852419, by undertaking a land investigation to determine the most appropriate use for the property, and undertaking community consultation in accordance with council's community engagement policy to determine the public's use of the park. Do we have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Potter. Seconder? Thank you, Councillor Froloff. Councillors wishing to speak for or against, questions or comments? Thank you. Mr CEO?
The only, which is an adjunct, it's not, last year we undertook a recruitment process for a property officer. There's a notice period, but they should be commencing shortly. Yeah, so some of these that have been held up in a bottleneck, we'll be able to, so the staff member, we're very confident we have a good one, no pressure there. And when you get a good one, even though you go through, they have to give due notice, so we just wait, anyway, which is the correct thing to do. So they'll be on deck shortly. So after some time of a wait, we'll have another resource in this area. So we'll start pumping a few of these through.
Thank you, Mr. Sio. If I could speak in favour of the motion, the council currently bears the cost of maintenance of this particular piece of land. As trustee of the Reserve for Park, from my observations, it may have potential for better utilisation through a commercial venture, but would certainly welcome a report from the officers in relation to the options there moving forward, and as such would like to recommend would like to certainly indicate my support for the motion as it stands. Manager, did you want to add anything to the commentary on this before we go to the vote?
The feedback from the Department of Resources that they have really indicated that we do need to go through quite a comprehensive community engagement process to prove to the department that council has actually discussed this matter with the community and taken on their feedback before we make that decision. So the department will be looking for evidence that we've gone through a comprehensive engagement process with the community.
Yes, thank you very much, Manager, and very confident that will happen as part of our due process, as we would normally do under our community engagement policy. Okay, councillors, those in favour? Passed unanimously, thank you all. Item 9.6 is use of a reserve land at Bunya Mountains at 85. And Councillor Shoemaker, thank you. Councillor Shoemaker has declared a conflict of interest and as such has now left the room and will remain absent until the matter is dealt with. Council representatives have met with Bunya Mountains Community Association to discuss the establishment of a meeting place and environmental interpretive centre at the Bunya Mountains on our reserve for park and recreation. The recommendation is that the committee recommend to council that council investigate the future development of lot 81 on FY 2309 being reserved for park and recreation, while liaising across state government and other stakeholders to determine appropriate development of the reserve or identify a more appropriate alternative site. Do we have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Jones. A seconder. Thank you, Councillor Froloff. I'll now might go to General Manager O'May or Manager Peterson to provide a little bit more background, and then councillors open the floor to questions, comments. Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so this has been a request from the Bunya Mountains Community Association. We have had officers, and I think councillors have met initially with the group. Certainly a progressive community organisation up there, which flush with members at the moment and meeting at the fire shed, and with COVID, they're certainly overflowing the fire shed. So I think that was the genesis of the concept, is that they could develop a meeting place up there, which could be an interpretive centre and added attraction for the Bunya Mountains. Council has Sterling Park on the corner of the Dandabar Avenue up there, so they had been identified as a potential location. It is heavily timbered block, so there are a number of investigations we would need to do if that was a suitable place. Particularly even the size of the block of land and the size of an interpretive centre that could go there, or meeting place. It is a reserve for park, so we are probably different to the previous block before, where we're looking at alternative uses. We would investigate whether the interpretive centre would fit with the reserve for park, so it's looking at whether that would be a fit for the reserve. If not, then we have to have those discussions with the Department of Resources on the use of the reserve. So really early days. There hasn't been any decisions or commitments made on who would be running, whether this would be a lease from council with the approval of the state to the community association, and they would be responsible for the first building at the capital cost. They'd be looking at at grant funding, ongoing costs, all the operational costs. Who would be responsible for that? Whether that would be completely with the community association, and what level of involvement council would have. So before we got too detailed into those operational arrangements and that we wanted to first investigate that site, and if it was going to be too difficult, whether it be through native title, vegetation management, or even just the reserve status, then we could look at alternative blocks of land for the association could investigate. So, yeah, I suppose we just wanted to bring council up to speed with where discussions were on this before it got too far, or there was and just make sure that council was aware of the project and I suppose initially supportive.
Thank you, General Manager. Manager, did you want to add anything to that at this stage? No, thank you. I just would highlight that in the report that's come from the officers here, that as trustee of the currently identified reserve, council must obtain consent from the Department of Resources for any development on the property or before granting any lease or licence to a third party. And as part of that process, there would also be a requirement for council to investigate native title, cultural heritage and vegetation management to determine if the development could progress on that property. So just to make clear for the information of the community, that the process would be a very rigorous one in accordance with the department's requirements, the state government's requirements, that the native title, cultural heritage and particularly vegetation management, of course, up there in that pristine area is going to be carefully assessed before any decision will be made on this. And of course there will be further community consultation around that, I would imagine, as well. So, councillors, any questions? Anyone wishing to speak for or against at this stage? Councillor Jones?
Yeah, Mr Mayor, just a quick one, just to back up what General Manager May said. You were a guest up there on Saturday and you've seen the keenness, as Pete's alluded to. They're very keen, and most community groups across our region are very keen, and they're wonderful people up there, but I guess the process that we have to follow, and you've just identified the processes and the clearances that we have to be given through native title and all that sort of stuff. This stuff doesn't happen in a week or 2 weeks or anything like that. It is a long, drawn-out process, and sometimes, the community have to just understand that this is a process and the red tape that we have to go through as a council. We can't make decisions without the backing of the state government and all the clearances from all different sections. But this is, they're referring to it as an interpretive centre, but I think they're trying to get it, they want it to sort of as a meeting place, but a conference centre and all that sort of stuff. They've got really good plans up there and fully supportive of what they're trying to do. But is there any way, Pete and Leanne, I guess, while the investigation's going on Stirling Park, is there any way that they could continue investigating for a second block of land or look for another site as a backup? Can they continue doing that, or can we look at that as well while ever we're waiting for an answer back on that?
I think that's a great idea. I think we would support that. I think we also need to be talking to our neighbouring shire as well, whether there's some additional land in that Western Downs area as well that is better suited. But yes, certainly support further investigations into other spaces up there as well.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Thank you, Manager. Okay, councillors, those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you all. Can someone bring Councillor Shoemaker back in? Thanks very much, Peter. Susan, thank you. Councillors, we'll now just note Councillor Shoemaker has rejoined the meeting. We now have 9.7, which is in relation to the new Proston Pool Manager. The current pool manager has been operating the pool since 2016 and has advised that he will not be taking up his final 2-year option. Council will be seeking applicants with a Cert 4 in swimming pool and spa service. It's recommended that the future pool manager lives within a short distance from the school-owned facility, as daily monitoring of pool plant and equipment is required and water testing is required 5 times per day. It is expected the contract will be for 1 year with an option of 2 years and then a further 2-year option. The officer's recommendation is that the committee recommends to council that council advertises for a new Proston pool manager under a management agreement contract. Do we have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Potter. A seconder. Thank you, Councillor Duff. Manager, would you like to just add some commentary to this? Thank you.
The current pool manager has provided excellent services to the Proston community and really assisted council in the delivery of great pool management. Unfortunately, what has happened is all pool managers throughout Queensland are going to have a certificate for in the swimming pool and spa service. So coming forward, all of our pool managers have to upgrade their qualifications to continue in this field. This does come at a large cost. And James has made a decision that he would now like to move on and look at other opportunities to further his career elsewhere. So we will be looking at supporting the other pool managers as well to get these qualifications up to standard. But this is a result of that new requirement and the impact it's going to have. So at this stage, all the other pool operators will continue to operate and obtain their qualifications with the support of council.
Thank you, Manager. Those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you all. Item 9.8 is at 90. Following discussions with Cherbourg Aboriginal Shire Council, councils have requested an investigation into flying the Indigenous flags at council's customer contact centres or alternate locations within each of the major towns within the South Burnett. As such, the officer's recommendation is that the committee recommends to council that as part of the 2021-22 budget deliberations, council investigate the costs associated with the installation of flagpoles across the region to allow the Australian flag and an Indigenous flag to be flown at each customer service centre or suitable alternate venue. Do we have a mover for such? Thank you, Councillor Duff. A seconder. Thank you, Councillor Shoemaker. Councillors wishing to speak for or against? Those in favour? Oh, sorry, hang on. Councillor Jones, yes.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Please proceed. Thank you.
Yeah, just quickly, I just see here, I just want to refer to Indigenous flag to be flown at a customer service centre or suitable alternate venue. If we go to Blackbutt, we've installed or worked with the RSL club down there and installed 2 flagpoles on the corner of Lesmulla Park. If we were to do that, that would probably be the appropriate place. I don't know. I don't think we've got flagpoles. If we were to put a place, I'm just looking at the into the future. If this comes off, the flagpole, could it be situated in Blackbutt? I'm only speaking about Blackbutt. In conjunction with those 2 existing poles and put them on that corner for also Anzac parades and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. That's probably exactly the intention of that recommendation for that example. And in Mergen, we're working with the Mergen RSL and having the 4 flagpoles installed there. So that's a work in progress. So the idea wasn't to duplicate those sort of things. It's to work in, and if that's the most appropriate position, then fly it at those locations.
Thank you, Councillor General Manager. Councillors, those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you all. Councillors, we have 2 items here to go into the confidential section. And the officer's recommendation is that council considers the confidential reports listed below in a meeting closed to the public in accordance with section 254J of the Local Government Regulation 2012, matter 1 being discussion on letter received from SB Care to council. Matter 2, lease of land for development and operation of fuel outlet at Geelong. I would move that council considers these reports in a meeting closed to the public in accordance with section 254J of the Local Government Regulation 2012. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Duff. Those in favour? I would now move that the meeting is adjourned, Mr. CEO, until such time as those matters are dealt with at 12:31 p.m. Thank you. Okay, well, welcome back into open council. We're now going to deal with the 2 items that have been discussed in closed session. I would note that the first item in relation to the letter received from SB Care to council, that councillors Shoemaker and Jones declared a conflict of interest and as such did not participate in the discussions in relation to this matter and are now leaving the room and will stay away from the meeting until the matter has been dealt with. I'd hereby move that council note the request and refer the matter back to the officers to seek further information. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Froloff. Those in favour? Resolution passed unanimously. Thank you all. Can we please bring back in Councillors Jones and Shoemaker? Thank you. Okay, the second item, the officer's recommendation is that the committee recommend to council that South Burnett Regional Council award the tender for the lease of part of Lot 1 on RP 50789, being Lease A on SB 320032, in accordance with the terms and conditions of the tender process, to the preferred tenderer, Emberwell Proprietary Limited, as trustee for the Tebrock Unit Trust, trading as Corbett's Group. Do we have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Potter. Seconder, thank you, Councillor Henson. Councillors wishing to comment? Otherwise, we'll go straight to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Okay. The resolution has been passed 6 votes to 1. Note, Councillor Duff has voted against the motion. Right, thank you all, councillors. All the matters on the agenda have now been dealt with, and I'll hereby call the meeting closed at 1:02 p.m. Thank you all.